Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. Night had fallen on the governor's residence in Shishan City. There were two men standing near a table laden with food, one of whom remarked that even for a wedding banquet, this was too extravagant, especially when they were going through a period where they were all short of supplies, while the other reminded him that this was, after all, an arranged marriage between the governor and the largest financial group in Shishan, the Yuan financial group. After which the other man added that this was the first time a human and a monster had married, so as a symbol of peace, it was natural that the celebration would be much grander than usual. The balding man took a cake and asked if his acquaintance would eat, but the man merely glanced at the child behind him and replied that he had no appetite, adding that he did not understand what the special forces were doing to allow a little beggar to slip into the assembly hall, and now the poverty he radiated left such a sour taste on his tongue. A boy approached the maids and asked for a piece of blueberry pie for his little sister's birthday. The women looked at him with displeasure and advised him to get lost, as this was no place for such a dirty tramp to be wandering around. A large shadow loomed over them. A huge one-eyed monster opened its mouth and asked if they had just said there was no more blueberry pie. The brunette's eyes widened in fear and she tried to answer. The boy was lifted by the scruff of the neck as the monster said that it was just using him as a substitute snack before its meal. The monster threw the child into its mouth. The woman turned pale as blood splattered on her and muttered that they still had blueberry pie. Thick red liquid dripped onto the floor. Suddenly, a rock flew at the monster's head. The little girl swung her arm and demanded that her brother be given back. The men turned around in fear and ran to avoid getting caught between the child and the monster. The villain leaned over to the little girl, baring his teeth, and said that her brother tasted great. She cried through clenched teeth, and the other man added that she would also make a wonderful snack. Everything in the golden hall sparkled and music sounded. The man bowed with a smile, turning to the governor, and said that thanks to him, they came to an agreement on a ceasefire, suppressing the flames of war between monsters and humans, and the Shishan region was fully prepared for restoration and rebuilding, and the quality of life of ordinary citizens also quickly began to return to the level it was before the war, and they looked forward to the bright future that awaits them. And then added that their Jinshire financial group would also like to offer a little help in rebuilding the city. There was a monster in a suit sitting on the throne, and a woman in a white dress on his lap, and he replied to President Jin that he had already so naturally given support to their troops that he would not forget such a contribution, so he offered him the position of president of the Shishan Reserve Bank in addition to the position of a board member of the Chinese trading group. To which the other person happily accepted and thanked him for his generous display of kindness. The two men looked at them from the side, discussing that this would make anyone envious. After all, President Jin had really achieved great success by obtaining these two lucrative positions, but his interlocutor countered that it was nothing special compared to the achievements of the Yuan financial group, and that cunning fox Yuan Jinyun had already relied on the help of monsters from the very beginning, occupying about half of the properties in the entire Shishan region, and now even his precious daughter was willing to marry the governor so that their prospects would be limitless, after which the man pointed out that the bride looked tiny compared to the frightening physique of the groom, so it was as if no one was killed on this auspicious day. Someone clapped their hands, calling for silence. The woman came down the stairs and suggested that they move according to the plan, since all the distinguished guests were already here, and asked the hunters to block all the exits and not let anyone leave, because the leader of the rebel army was right among them, and they would be able to quickly detain him, and everything would be over in an instant. The people looked at Yuan Jia with displeasure and asked what this meant, and why they were planning to use them as bait, especially since they did not want to stay in the same place with the people from the rebel army, because it was too dangerous. The warriors closed the gate and asked them to remain calm, because everything was going as the lady had planned, and they would guarantee the safety of all the guests present today. Suddenly, the door was knocked down, and pieces of a large body flew into the hall. The guests raised their heads in fear as blood rained down on them. The eye of the one-eyed monster was covered with a bloody haze, and the voice said that it wanted to give everyone a small gift to celebrate the governor's wedding. The protagonist smirked as he held the part of the dead monster and asked if he had come at an inopportune time. Everyone rushed to the exit, shouting that there was a man who dared to do such a thing on the grand day of the governor's wedding, and no one here could obviously guarantee their safety. The woman stepped forward, recognizing the wanted A-rank criminals with she smirked and said that she had been busy dealing with the rebel army forces recently, and she didn't want to personally deal with a minor character of his level, but he had shown up at the perfect time, so she could use the guy as the first gift for the groom. The girl waved her hand and said that she had currently sent hunters to the martial arts center that had accepted him, and their original goal was to use the center as bait to lure him out, but since they hadn't found the hero there, everyone he knew had probably already been completely wiped out. The brunette raised an eyebrow and replied that if they had already undergone his training, but were still killed by the scum that had been sent, then they themselves were scum and deserved to die. The other woman's eyes flashed, and she admitted that she didn't like stubborn men like him, since it usually meant that it was a complex about another part of the body that wasn't usually hard enough. She pointed forward, and at her command, several people rushed to catch Chi. The guy raised his hand when armed opponents approached him and noted that this was commendable loyalty. He cut the enemies with his fingers in a few precise movements, and, with a flash of his eyes, added that it was a pity that they couldn't grasp the difference in strength. There were corpses lying around him, and the woman mentally tried to understand how one S-rank hunter and 3 A-rank hunters were defeated in an instant. The hero suddenly appeared in front of her. He smirked and asked if these scum were the same hunters she had referred to earlier in the conversation. Jia sweated, thinking that she hadn't even noticed when her opponent had gotten so close, and was terrified that she would die, losing all the ambitions she had worked so hard for. The brunette passed by and, closing his eyes, said that he didn't kill women, so she shouldn't stand in his way. The interlocutor stretched her lips into a smile, and thought that this was very stupid of him. She frowned and decided that she would make him regret this decision. She suddenly turned around and punched her so hard that she flew into the wall. He smiled and said that he thought about it, and realized that since she was married to a monster, she shouldn't be considered a woman, and not a person at all. The monster landed in front of him, saying that the hero was a very interesting guy. The governor looked down at him and noticed that there was no magical power coming from his body, so he was neither a hunter nor a monster, but he still had such power. The youth clenched his fist with a smile. He swung and said that this was called martial arts. The youth brought down a blow on the enemy, and everything around him shook, raising a cloud of dust. The enemy opened his mouth and asked if his art was really that strong. The monster blocked the attack and said that his comrades once came to such a world where they reigned supreme, but there were several experts whose strength was impressive, but the martial artists of this world were just trash, weaker than hunters, and the youth proved that he was very weak. The brunette grinned and remained silent. His hand turned red after using the layer 18 golden bell. Then armor appeared on his legs from the layer 12 iron shirt, and half of his head was dressed in the body of the layer 16 black demon lord, and the hero used the 9 transformations of the 3rd layer golden body. She stretched his neck and said that this sensation really made him feel carefree and relaxed. He suddenly grabbed the enemy's face and added that he didn't care about anything more than the enemy's screams. The guy slammed the monster into the floor with force. It winced in pain and exclaimed that he wasn't even human, so what was he? She sneered and asked how the corrupt monsters who treated human lives as food could understand the true meaning of martial arts. But he was actually able to condense the great preparation using the 5 chi towards Yuan technique, surpassing the limits of the human race and becoming a true immortal. A few years ago, in the martial arts world, 2 warriors were surrounded by monsters, and the youth exclaimed that the demonic beasts were still here. He gritted his teeth as he noticed that they were surrounded. The alliance leader swung his blade, cutting down the enemy. The old man frowned and muttered that this place was a trap, but what he did not expect was that he would die along with the leader of the demon cult. The red-haired woman raised her hands with purple threads and asked if this was all that the leader of the 5 Peaks Blades Alliance could do, and then why not let her drain his body dry and saturate herself with internal energy so that she could deal with a couple more demonic beasts. A large paw crushed the young man. The demon's eyes flashed and smirked that these little humans were still resisting, and the old man cursed, because they barely defeated him, working together. The leader frowned and muttered that their path would end here. The enemy swung his paw, shouting that he would devour them. Suddenly, a bright beam pierced his chest. The body collapsed on the ground in front of the old man. The protagonist smirked and noted that they were both still alive. The allies raised their heads, and the man realized that she had become stronger again. The woman blushed and said that his true energy was looking more and more delicious, and offered to merge in joint cultivation, and then their children would definitely become the strongest martial artists in history. The brunette grinned and refused, reminding him that he was pursuing the peak of the Tao of martial arts. The old man narrowed his eyes and said that the guy had arrived just in time, because together with him they would definitely be able to escape from the encirclement of the demonic beast. The brunette jumped to the ground and was indignant that he wanted to run away, because he was going to finish off the one who betrayed them. The young man walked past with a smile, when the interlocutor exclaimed that their opponent was the strongest master of this world from the Heavenly Blade clan, and said that he would go first, asking the man to try not to die, otherwise he would visit his grave every year to have a good laugh. The old man grinned and replied that he was still extremely powerful and would survive 200 years, so the young man had better try not to die sooner. The hero jumped up to meet the monsters and exclaimed that the leader should conserve this energy and show fortitude, like when fighting him. The brunette rushed forward, tearing off the demon's limbs and shouting that all these beasts must be defeated. The man clenched his teeth, through which blood flowed. He hung, pierced by the monster's tentacles, and next to him stood a fair-haired man. The brunette narrowed his eyes and asked why he betrayed them. The dark entity behind Qin Yuan laughed, and noted that thanks to him, all the masters of the world were defeated in one fell swoop, so how did he feel watching his comrades die right in front of his face? The demon darkened and muttered that he hated the silent ones, and his second face noticed the new guest. The protagonist landed on the monster's head, slamming it into the ground, and the black entity noted that he looked like a worthy enemy to stretch his legs and have some fun with. The blonde raised his hand and drew a blue line in front of him, causing the demon to scream that he almost died. The long-haired one's eyes flashed and declared that this was his opponent. The monster looked at him, glad that he could talk after all, and added that he just wanted to help, since his job was to protect the guy until the ceremony was complete. She stood in front of his opponent, asking why he had allied with demons, and the other replied that it was for the sake of the peak of the Tao of martial arts. The brunette chuckled and noted that his brain had completely gone rotten, since it was very stupid to betray his comrades and fraternize with a demonic beast for such a purpose. The blonde man furrowed his brows and said that these people were not his comrades, because they never even understood him, pursuing wealth, respect, power, but the Tao of martial arts was just a tool for them. But she is the same, because he pursues an illusory legend, immortality, the peak. The guy shrugged and clarified, would an alliance with demons make him immortal, like a sweet fruit that even tempts him? Yuan clenched his fists and said that the hero with his terrifying talent for martial arts gave him an urgent need to cultivate with all his might, and today his abilities have surpassed all the ancestors in the history of the Heavenly Blade clan. But this is the end of the path of the Tao of martial arts. There is no further road, and immortality is impossible to achieve. He smiled and invited the hero to stand by his side, noting that he would be able to overcome even his potential after transforming into a demonic beast, and as soon as they complete the transformation ceremony, they will find a path that belongs only to them. The black entity leaned over the blonde, surprised that he was going to give half of the energy from the sacrifices of the masters of this world, but the man explained that he was a worthy warrior. The demon turned to the brunette and said that, judging by their information, this guy was completely different from the long-haired one, who was born from the strongest clan in the world, and the same was a beggar, dependent on the criminal gang he joined, and somehow learned a backwater martial art, but all he had was effort, so he became only the second master. The shadow emitted energy, and exclaimed that he should be glad that he was worthy of becoming one of them and living forever, but she said that he did not need it. The guy grinned and replied that he did not want to become a beast. Moreover, the information was incorrect, and he was not second after the blonde. The hero swung, concentrating energy, and said that he would destroy the enemy, and then the demon. The opponent extended his hand, calling for the heavenly blade, and agreed that they would have to convince his body, since words were useless. The warriors clashed in battle, and their magic flashed around. Chi bared his teeth and clenched his fist, shouting that for the end of his martial arts path, it was somehow weak, but the interlocutor admitted that he pitied him. The long-haired man began to advance, waving his sword. Their energies clashed with each other. The protagonist's eyes flashed and he swung, offering to settle everything with one blow. Yuan prepared a blue beam of mana and agreed. The opponents exchanged attacks. A powerful explosion fell to the ground, raising stones around. A few drops of blood fell to the ground. It flowed from the man's hand. She turned to the enemy and asked if he was convinced now, and the blonde noted that he was lucky to be ahead of him by one move, and the victory was his. The brunette approached, saying that this was not luck, and in the future he would beat him twice, 3 times, each time. Suddenly, one of the blonde's eyes flared with black flame, and he replied that it was too late, because the transformation ceremony had begun. His body was inside a purple sphere, to which energy was drawn. The hero stood not far from him. Bright threads were drawn to the villain, sucking the strength out of the people around him and the monsters. The monsters bared their teeth, flashing their red eyes, and shouted, "Evolution, immortality!" The dark army looked at the purple sphere and rejoiced. A bright flash appeared in the sky, illuminating everything around. A bright face appeared from behind the black feathers. Yuan spread his wings, demonstrating his new form. The demon raised his head and admired the talent of the warrior, who had only just completed the transformation ceremony, and had already surpassed the legionnaire level and reached the commander. The blonde opened his mouth and told the protagonist that this was his last chance. He extended his hand, hovering in front of the brunette, and said that this world was finished, but he could come with him and conquer countless places beyond this sky to find his way. She smirked and laughed at the ugliness of his opponent, asking if this was the power he desired and for which he betrayed his martial art. The interlocutor suddenly appeared in front of his face, and the youth widened his eyes. The opponent placed his hand on his chest. A powerful energy burst out from it, crashing down on the hero. She frowned, receiving a hole in the heart, and muttered that he was hitting from behind. The blonde and the demon moved towards the purple portal to go to the next world. The brunette saw them leaving through half-closed eyelids. She gritted his teeth as he lay on the ground, muttering that failing to conquer his martial art and dying here was a laughingstock, but he would definitely finish Yuan off no matter which world he went to. The silhouettes disappeared into the sparkling rift. The portal shrank, and suddenly voices were heard. "The heavens will punish the traitors. Let's get Shishan back." The boy opened his eyes slightly, trying to figure out if he really died at the hands of Yuan. He sat in the room surrounded by corpses, and mentally noted the luxurious furniture and decoration in an unfamiliar style. The young man lowered his gaze and noticed the tastefully tailored clothes that would need to be adjusted at the tailor's. The brunette squinted and realized that he couldn't move a finger. His bones were broken, there was internal bleeding, but more importantly, this was a different body, with weaker muscles and no trace of energy. Suddenly, the bespectacled man appeared at the threshold, addressed him by name and asked if he could hear him. The guy quickly approached, saying that there was no time left, and if he did not escape now, it would be too late. He looked into the room, saying something about a traitor, but then he stopped. The stranger flinched, noticing that Jingmin, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, was dead, although he could have been used alive. The young man grabbed his head and exclaimed that this traitor deserved to die, and since he was dead, the signing of the peace treaty would be suspended for a while, but it was not safe here now. He turned his attention to Qi, who was sitting silently. His friend approached him and noted with relief that he was still breathing. The bespectacled man picked him up and said that he would drag him to the hospital, and when the brunette returned, he would become a hero. Suddenly, a fair-haired man entered the office, saying that brats were only capable of playing house with their protests, riots and banners, calling themselves heroes. He stepped on the hand of one of the bodies. The bones crunched under his weight. The man looked down and frowned. He looked at the young men in shock and asked if it was really a corpse. The stranger laughed in surprise and exclaimed that they were completely crazy to have finished off on Jingmin, so they could even forget about the riots in the diplomat's official residence. The man closed his eyes and added that he did not understand them at all, what prompted Xishan University students with a bright future to do such a thing. The bespectacled man frowned and exclaimed that he had to stop asking questions as if he did not understand anything, since it was all for the sake of preventing the signing of the peace treaty. The blonde smirked and reminded him that after the fighting ended, it took the Xishan government almost a month to finalize all the details of the negotiations, the hard-earned peace between humans and monsters, and the little bastards had ruined it all. The other man gritted his teeth and shouted that he himself was a traitor for walking over the heads of his comrades when he gave up human territory to monsters, and that this was just dog shit, not a peace treaty. But it must be great for him to kill a bunch of people and then talk about peace, pretending not to know that the ambitions of monsters would never be satisfied. The man gestured with his hand and objected that at least they were alive, and the schoolchildren were only provoking another war with their behavior. He suddenly reached forward. The man grabbed the surprised bespectacled man by the throat and asked if he really wanted to gawk at the bloodshed and death. The young man frowned and began to choke, demanding to be let go. The blonde man glared menacingly and said that their games had gone too far and they had crossed the line, so now they would die. He let go of the neck, which still had marks on it. The man raised his eyebrows and added that it was a joke, because the precious students of Xishan University could not die here. The student sank to the floor and coughed, and the interlocutor said that such a death would be too good for them. The prison building was illuminated with lights. The students looked down at the people from above with displeasure and demanded to be released, chanting that the heavens would punish the traitors and return Xishan. The men looked down at them, and the brunette noted that there was a lot of noise, and asked how many people were arrested in total, to which the interlocutor replied that all 196 university students who were seen participating in the rebellion. The blonde crossed his arms and asked him not to be angry and to consider it a gift, because the governor's office had set important goals for his prison, and active and passionate students were perfect as material for experiments. The warden frowned and reminded him that this was the largest university in the region, from which many major political figures graduated, and he did not want any problems for himself. The brunette turned to the man, who said that he was scared, and countered that he was simply worried about public opinion and the consequences for the peace treaty, to which the interlocutor said that the prisoners had finished off the Minister of Foreign Affairs, so the big shots at the top were quite disappointed with them, which meant that in a couple of days after the peace treaty was signed, they could be used for experiments. The head of the prison chuckled and guessed why they were sent under his care, and the blonde warned that a little earlier a student was brought to the prison cell, who, according to their information, had been practicing martial arts since childhood, and also killed Jingmin, who was under the protection of 5 armed bodyguards. The brunette raised his eyebrows with a smile and reminded that the head warden of this prison is a C-rank hunter. He licked his lips and exclaimed that martial arts are just trash that no one has used for many years. There were rugs on the floor of the room. The protagonist opened his eyes. He crouched down, trying to figure out who brought him and where. But what is also important is that his wounds began to worsen, as if he was playing tag with death. The boy smirked and realized that he would die if he failed to cultivate qi and stabilize his state, and remembered that in his past life, he was born into a poor family and practiced unconventional martial arts techniques to survive. The brunette sat in the lotus position and closed his eyes, thinking that he had failed to establish a solid foundation of qi in the early stages of his cultivation, and this small omission greatly affected the progress of all subsequent cultivation, because it depends on the quality of the foundation just like the construction of an ordinary building, but now he had a chance to start over. The youth knitted his brows, thinking that his head had retained many cultivation techniques. Coupled with the practical experience of decades, he would soon surpass his past self. A blue fire ignited in his abdomen, and the hero decided that the pure yang technique was perfect for this body, and then was surprised that in just a few breaths, the true chi of pure yang was cultivated, so this body was full of talents. Suddenly the flame dissolved into thin air. Chi opened his eyes in confusion, not understanding why the true chi had evaporated, and decided to try something else. Amitabha, Internal Qigong, the Jade Heart Sutra, the Great Prajna Nirvana Dharma, and even Kundalini Yoga. The brunette widened his eyes in confusion, realizing that all the chi energy he had cultivated had disappeared somewhere. A light bluish force emanated from his body, and the guy noted that if he had not been able to cultivate, he would have died long ago, but he felt his wounds healing by themselves, which meant that the chi had been swallowed by this body. The hero grinned and noted that he was going through miraculous changes. The bespectacled man appeared in the doorway, happy that his friend had woken up. He gritted his teeth and exclaimed that these bastards refused to provide him with medical care and left him to die, so the young man himself could only wash and bandage his wounds. The protagonist looked at the guest, thanked him and asked him to state his name, adding that he would repay this debt sooner or later. Meng Guangxian shuddered and introduced himself, reminding him that he was his classmate and best friend. The brunette frowned and replied that he did not remember such a thing, and he did not need friends. They only disappointed him. The bespectacled man sat down opposite and asked if he really had lost his memory. They exchanged glances, and she replied that his mind was in complete disarray and did not remember anything from the past, but he heard him call him by name, and his friend realized that this was complete amnesia that needed to be dealt with. The student began to tell something, actively gesticulating, and the hero nodded thoughtfully. The brunette rubbed his chin and concluded that this world had been invaded by monsters, and humanity had lost 1/3 of its lands and was trying to make peace through compromise, and they were all students at Shishan University who, in order to prevent the peace treaty from being signed, had gone to the streets to protest under the leadership of a rebel, but the real plan was to kidnap the diplomat in Jingmin. But everything had gone wrong and he had killed the man, after which they had been thrown into prison. The interlocutor looked at him and said that the rebels would not abandon them and would soon get them out of here, but the brunette noted that his tone did not inspire confidence, and how strong these rebels were and how many monsters they had killed. The bespectacled man frowned and said, 10,000 monsters and more than 1,300 traitors to humanity. The protagonist grinned and asked what about yesterday. The friends looked at each other, and the brunette guessed that he had only named the total number. Chi's eyes flashed and concluded that the rebels were weaklings, declaring that he would drag him out of here himself. The outdoor area was surrounded by a high fence and electric wire. The boy walked forward. Guangxian ran after his friend, saying that his body needed rest, so let him go back to rest, but he replied that he had almost recovered. He looked away and muttered that it was strange. The interlocutor looked at him with alarm and asked what was the matter, if he was feeling unwell. The hero looked around enthusiastically and exclaimed that there were madmen in this country, allowing criminals to live in such good conditions, and the student covered his face with his hand, explaining that the students of Shishan University were content with a special status even under arrest. Someone smiled and exclaimed that she had woken up. Several guys looked at them, saying that they knew that he would not be killed so easily. Besides, he had killed in Jingmin and prevented them from signing the peace treaty. The students crowded around the hero, discussing that he would definitely become a remarkable person, so he should not forget about them either, but the guy sitting nearby just smirked. The bespectacled man looked at Zhou Xian with displeasure and demanded that he say it directly if he did not like something. The young man stood up and pointed at the main character, asking if he really considered himself a hero. He frowned and reminded him that he had said he would go to the protest, but he had secretly murdered a diplomat, which he was proud of, and they had been sent to prison as well. She put his hands in his pockets and muttered that he didn't care, and his friend stood up for him, saying that he had risked his life for this cause and almost died, all to prevent them from signing a peace treaty at any cost. So did his interlocutor really regret it? Xian gritted his teeth and replied that he did regret it, because in 3 days the warden had taken 6 students for interrogation, and none of them had returned, and now they were all corpses that no one would save, and it was scary to even imagine what was going on with the girls in the other wing. A man in a suit approached the crowd and noted that it was very lively. Apparently he had come at the wrong time. Guangxian and she turned to the warden, and the bespectacled man demanded that his classmates be returned. The brunette chuckled and asked them not to take it so seriously, but he thought about it and brought them something to distract themselves. He waved his hand and ordered the TV to be taken out. 2 men rolled in a large screen. The protagonist raised an eyebrow and noted that not only did they let them live in such a luxurious house, but they also provided entertainment, so they could arrange an escape later. The young man tapped the screen and asked how to turn on this thing, to which the guard muttered that the guy who managed to kill the diplomat had completely lost his mind, so they could deal with him later. There would be plenty of time for conversation. The man pressed a button on the remote. The screen immediately lit up with a characteristic sound. The host smiled and announced that after 30 days of negotiations, the long-awaited truce had been concluded. Due to misunderstandings caused by differences in cultural values, travelers from other worlds had unfortunately collided with humanity, and the war that lasted for a whole year had caused many casualties on both the human and War Master's side, and today, in the border territory of Shishan, a peace treaty was signed between humanity and the War Masters. On the screen, a large monster was shaking hands with a man. The prisoners looked at the TV, and the woman added that the border was divided by western cliffs, on the southern side of which there was an area temporarily inhabited and ruled by War Masters. Someone fell to their knees. The students' eyes widened and asked if the peace treaty had really been signed, and their efforts had been in vain. The bespectacled man frowned and exclaimed that this was a lie. How could the agreement be signed so quickly if the foreign minister was dead? The warden smiled and asked if they really thought that a few students could change the course of history, that the death of one diplomat would change the destined future of two races. The man raised his eyebrows and asked not to be ridiculous, and if they were unable to see clearly, they would only be pawns in the game of the powerful, and they were abandoned, because the Shishan provisional government was fed up with them, and the rebels would never waste their energy on them at such a difficult time, so their only value was their young bodies, which were perfect for experiments in this prison. Guangxian frowned and asked what this psychopath had done to their friends, adding that the news would find out about it. The man grinned menacingly and retorted that no one would find out, but even if they did, he would be praised for the future he had created. The warden nudged the bespectacled man and noted that it was not his turn today, since the subject of the experiment would be their great hero, who had risen from the dead. The main character grinned, noting that the trick of putting people and animals in a box was certainly interesting, but it was already boring, so let him have fun, otherwise he would get out of here. The guy slammed his fist on the bars. Guangxian gritted his teeth and muttered that he could not wait any longer, and that they would have to save themselves, but they should act as soon as possible. Xian frowned and exclaimed that he was now pretending to be some kind of hero, but when their classmates were taken away 2 days ago, he did nothing. The interlocutor looked at him and replied that the situation was completely different, and now they were abandoned as soon as the peace treaty was signed, and if he was not going to perish here as an object of the warden's experiments, then he should join the rebellion and escape from this hell with them. The red-haired man put his hand in his pocket and replied that it was all about Qi, who had been taken away by the boss, and that was why the bespectacled man was furious, but he said that he wanted to save his other friends as well as the girls locked in another section. The guy sitting on his knees arched his eyebrows and laughed, saying that the warden was a hunter, and that this prison was guarded by a bunch of monsters, so they couldn't do anything. The students surrounded Guangxian, exclaiming that the minister's death had done nothing, and the peace treaty had been signed anyway, and they had been sent to slaughter, and all their suffering was because of him. Xian frowned and said that she had been caught and sent for an experiment, which is what he deserved, even if he died, and no one would come to save him. The door to the lab. The dark-haired girl and the masked man stood over the test subject, and he announced that based on the results of the previous session, the dosage of the catalyst had been halved and the composition of drug number 4 had been reformulated, and then announced the start of the 350th session. The blonde student frowned and asked why Sun Manhwa wanted to become their mutt. The brunette took the syringe and replied that she was doing everything to survive, and before her eyes, 12 classmates had already turned into pools of blood, writhing in pain, and although she thought it would be scary, in the end she could only laugh at how they looked. The interlocutor arched her eyebrows and objected that she was not that kind of person, and they were best friends. Manhwa leaned over and smirked, saying that she never thought so. Moreover, she hated the behavior of such a rich girl the most. The patient's eyes widened as she looked at the sharp needle with poison. 2 men were walking down the corridor, and a heart-rending scream was heard ahead. The protagonist stuck his hands in his pockets, following the warden, and muttered that these screams were making him sleepy, hoping that he had not been brought here for some kind of torture with all sorts of crap, and the interlocutor responded that he would not disappoint. He opened the door slightly. Manhwa covered her mouth, looking at the mess on the floor, and the man noted that they had just made it to the most exciting part. A bloody substance slid behind the chair, screaming in pain. Tears flowed from empty eye sockets, and a voice begged for help. The brunette stepped on her with contempt and demanded that he not come near her. She smirked and muttered that it was so disgusting, and her ex-girlfriend now smelled so bad. There were smoking scraps on the floor. The warden approached the employee collecting the material and noted that, unfortunately, the experiment had failed once again, and he replied that the idea behind drug number 4 was correct, because after reducing the dosage of the catalyst, the subject was able to maintain its shape after death, and did not turn into a pool of blood. She raised an eyebrow and asked if they really wanted to show him how people turned into monsters. The man spread his arms and exclaimed that he could see a discovery that would change the world, and he would become the pioneer who changed it. The brunette looked at him and concluded that he simply liked to kill people. The interlocutor's eyes flashed and noted that, apparently, the young man did not understand anything, but the war between people and monsters will only truly end when all of humanity becomes monsters. He introduced the blonde man with wings and said that at the moment, there was only one known successful case among the countless worlds invaded by monsters. Only in one of them, the miracle of turning a human into a monster occurred. The overseer hugged his subordinate and said that everything would soon change, because using the technology of their world, they had made tremendous progress in studying the process of turning into a monster, and even the great nature that was once a human had noticed it. The protagonist grinned and exclaimed that this was wonderful, asking if the monster who had rejected his humanity was also somewhere here. The interlocutor smiled madly and replied that the master's power was far beyond the level of a legionnaire, and this world was not yet able to withstand such power. But on the day of his arrival, they, the pioneers, would deserve the highest praise. He approached the student and added that for the sake of his brilliant future, it was Qi, as a terrible sinner who laid hands on the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who would become part of his achievements. Purple stripes appeared around the young man's forearm and bone. They stretched out over his entire body, and the hero inquired about what they were. The man took the syringe and asked Manhwa to continue, to see what effect drug number 4 would have on someone who practiced martial arts. He hugged the girl, but she exclaimed that the hero would kill her if he rashly approached. The warden stuck out his tongue, touching the girl's lips, and said that he was extremely pleased with her work both day and night, so he could not allow such a useful tool to perish, and he limited the boy's movements with his mental ability. Now he would not be able to move a finger. She smirked and muttered, "Is this really the power of a hunter? Which is very interesting." The man looked at the boy and exclaimed that he had experienced the gigantic gap between martial artists and hunters. The girl took the syringe from his hands. Manhwa frowned and turned to the brunette, saying that it was because of him that they ended up in this situation, and she just wanted to live, so he should understand her and remain silent. The warden grinned and asked how the boy felt about being betrayed by his comrades, adding that rejected martial artists would become much more valuable as monsters. The girl swung her arm and said goodbye, calling the boy a useless hero. She glared at her and offered to repeat it again. The interlocutor's eyes widened in horror when a syringe was stuck into her neck. She tried to break free, but the brunette held her hand tightly. The young man grinned and asked how it worked. The brunette grimaced in fear, but the protagonist resolutely pressed the syringe and injected her with poison. The warden looked at them in bewilderment, not understanding what was happening, because he had definitely immobilized the student with his ability. The girl's body shook and began to change when she turned to the man. Manhwa turned around, showing a terrible mouth, and muttered that she wanted to eat. The warden jumped back, and his subordinate was caught by a new monster. The protagonist stood behind the man, who did not understand anything, pronouncing numbers. He turned around and nervously asked what he was counting. The hero grinned and answered that this was the time during which his wounds would completely heal, and now he could finish him off. She suddenly jumped up and slammed his interlocutor into the floor. Purple lightning flashed in the air. The man sank down near the wall, and part of his face radiated energy. The young man looked through the hole in the wall and noted that it was as if he had hit a bar of soap. It did not look like flesh at all, and asked if he had really used that strange mental trick again. The overseer's eyes flashed and explained that a C-rank hunter could coat his entire body with the energy of the mind, which was already enough to withstand a missile hit, so an empty space like a hero would not leave a scratch on it. The young man grinned and decided that he should look into the abilities of hunters, after which he asked to show his strength again, in exchange for the opportunity to live a little longer. The man arched unnaturally as he rose, and advised the guy to watch his words, because even the best martial artist in the world could barely compare to a C-rank hunter. He glanced at the student, and added that he would never win. The warden extended his hand and attacked with the purple disc. The projectile crashed into the wall next to the hero's head, but he only leaned to the side. The brunette shook off his jacket and noted that the destructive ability was good, but not concentrated enough, and consumed too much energy, and the maneuverability was average. The angle of attack changed twice, but the second turn was too sharp and was easy to avoid. The man created 2 spheres on his palms and smirked that the guy was acting like a reality show, and asked to consider the previous attack just a greeting. He extended his hands and sent several projectiles flying, asking if the hero really thought that he could only shoot once. His face distorted while the warden suggested that his opponent run and see if he could dodge. The main character rushed to the side, deftly dodging the projectiles. At some point, he pushed off the wall with a smirk. The guy grinned and thought that without the protection of Ki, this fragile body would fall apart at the first hit, which only made it more fun. He threw a stone. It crashed into the opponent's energy shield. The man grimaced and asked if the student was really throwing stones. The brunette picked up a whole handful. Then he threw them all at once. The warden grinned as the stones crashed into his defense, and exclaimed that the boy was ridiculous if he seriously thought that this would break through his mental defense. The hero smiled and replied that it was worth a try. He abruptly threw the last stone. It ricocheted off the others, and the opponent only muttered that the student was crazy. A zigzag appeared in the air from behind the stones in front of the warden, which unexpectedly hypnotized him. The protagonist remembered the man in the robe leaning over the boy and thought that a skilled hypnotist could invade someone's mind through words, sounds, actions, and even eyes. He imagined a burning candle and a pocket watch. The guy visualized a ninja and noted that in the world of martial arts, one clan whose attack methods included hidden weapons and throwing objects created a hypnosis technique that allows you to enter the mind of an opponent using the trajectory and sound of a thrown weapon without using true ki, and its effects can put the enemy in a state of imaginary weightlessness, confusion, and even coma. She suddenly appeared in front of the enemy, hitting him with his fists. He closed his eyes, coming to his senses. He looked at the boy and asked if he had played enough. The man activated the spheres on his palms and exclaimed that at such a close distance, he could not escape. The guy touched his enemy's shield with his finger, and it split. The shockwave threw the warden back. She looked at him and noted that the defense was cool, because it took 16 hits in 3 seconds, and 1 place to break through. The opponent leaned on his feet and cursed, outraged that he didn't respect him. He frowned and exclaimed that the hero could have killed him if he had applied a little more force, so why did he stop? The guy smiled and reminded him that he was simply researching mental abilities, so he would not let him die until he finished figuring it out. The interlocutor frowned and was indignant that the student was using him as a test subject, and added that he was just lucky now, but he missed his last chance to finish him off, because his little trick would not work again. She quickly approached and hit the enemy in the chest with his knee. He flew back and laughed. He smirked and exclaimed that it was pointless because his mental defense had already been restored and there would be no chance to attack him so often anymore. The brunette came closer and noted that there was no point in researching if you attacked him the same way time after time. Suddenly, blood spurted from the guard's mouth. He bent over and asked what he had done to him, and the young man explained that while he was breaking through the defense, he had studied the strength, durability, and number of vibrations per second of his mental ability, and knowing these characteristics, he could now directly attack his body with his mental power. The guy rubbed his chin and added that it was rare for 2 people to have such a precise match in mental characteristics, so if you need to break through the opponent's mental defense before using this technique, it was of little use, and in a real battle, victory or defeat could be decided by the first breakthrough of someone else's defense. The guard grimaced, holding his chest, and thought that this psycho was impossible to understand with common sense. Scarlet shells were flying down the corridor. The man in the cap turned around, hearing the sounds of explosions. The partners turned around, assuming that someone wanted to escape from the prison, but the second one immediately reminded that there was an interrogation room with a guard on the other side, so that was impossible. The leader appeared in front of them, continuously attacking, and shouted at them to get out of the way. The guards were immediately killed, and the man rushed on. He stopped and asked if they had finally managed to finish off the opponent. The smoke cleared, and the hero's voice was heard, asking where he ran off to, because he liked experiments so much. She appeared in front of him and offered to continue the experiments. The man sat on his knees in front of the interlocutor, asking again. He raised his battered face and muttered that he had a copy of that key, but he did not know which room it was for. The man extended his hand towards him, activating the energy, and said that he was from the room of the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the interlocutor fearfully asked to let go, muttering that he did not want to know. A purple aura emanated from the hunter's hand. Black tentacles grew out of the ground, and he ordered them to devour the man. He tried to jerk forward, screaming that he was wrong and that he should not have agreed to this. He went underground screaming. Only a black puddle remained on the asphalt, and the blonde standing behind clarified whether his colleague had finished. The interlocutor looked at him and answered in the affirmative, adding that everyone involved in the case had been completely eliminated, as well as the evidence, and if he killed him too, no one would ever know that Jingmin's death was orchestrated by him. The man smirked and asked him not to joke like that, since he was his best subordinate, and he couldn't afford to lose him, but he still couldn't say that everyone involved was finished, since the death of their most important witness, the scapegoat, hadn't been confirmed yet. The brunette looked at him and asked why the young man was so important, since it took a lot of time and effort to frame Chi for the deputy's murder, all for the sake of making the incident look natural and not arouse suspicion. The blonde exhaled smoke and replied that the owner of the Ming Xian martial arts school, Dao, was the true eminence grise of the city before the demons appeared, and his influence extended to both the criminal world and the law-abiding society, commanding respect even from large corporations. The interlocutor looked at his boss in surprise and muttered that he grew up on stories about this man. The man smiled and said that more than 10 years ago, Dao adopted an orphan and named him Chi, but the boy said that he didn't understand what the problem was. Even the strongest martial artist of Shishan at the moment was no match for even a B-rank hunter. The blonde man's eyes flashed and said that, in addition to the well-known Ming Xian school, this so-called good-for-nothing old man owns several unspecified dubious assets hidden from the public eye, such as the Black Snake Society, a subsidiary organization of the martial arts school, although most of its members are just common punks, but they have access to a lot of secret information. The hunter gestured and asked if they were rebels, and the other man noted that he was smart, adding that when the war was over, these shady characters, like rats in a sewer, completely disappeared, and if you were going to root out the rebels, you would have to rely on the information network of these punks. The brunette sweated and said that, of course, capturing the rebels, especially their leader, would be a significant achievement, but if their involvement was discovered, there would be problems. The man grinned and said that he would not have the courage if he were alone, but the death of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as the takeover of the Black Snake Society, is connected with power machinations at the top, and behind him there is a powerful group. Even though he is the director of the data analysis department, he does not plan to live out his life clinging to this boring position. Then he asked if the guy plans to spend the rest of his life as the leader of the squad. The interlocutor stretched his lips into a smile and replied that he had his own ambitions, and therefore he was with them, after which he clarified whether to deal with Chi as well. The hunter took out a new cigarette and asked not to do anything, because that student was a key figure in this incident, and in order not to create problems for the boss, it was worth distancing himself from him. The guy came closer and asked what would happen if the hero recovered from his wounds, woke up and started chatting, and he answered that he deliberately left the guy alive to use him as bait. The man lit a cigarette and suggested that Ming Xian Martial Arts School would step in and save the boy, which would be to their advantage as it would provide the perfect opportunity to lure out Swadao, so they could influence him to listen, and at the same time, it would be a pretext to kill Chi, although of course, the old man had already lost the will to fight, so there was a chance that he would not go to save his son, but in that case, the idiot warden would finish the guy off and help tie up the loose ends. The blonde smirked and added that, in any case, no matter how the protagonist died, it was not up to him to decide what crime he would be convicted of, and the martial arts school itself was already under suspicion of collaborating with the rebels, and if the old man wanted to save the lives of the students, he would have to sacrifice the Black Snake Society. Dusk was falling over the prison. The warden rushed forward, calling for help and asking the boy not to come near. The monster opened its mouth and asked him to shut up. It looked down at the man and asked him why he was panicking, hearing in response that he was being chased by a prisoner. Another monster approached Limbs and said that this trash is not fit to work as a jailer, and the interlocutor snapped that then they would have to do the job of a warden themselves. But now, thanks to this faithful slave, they live happily here. Footsteps were heard approaching. The protagonist approached and asked if the man had found backup. He recoiled in fear and warned Limbs and Alibi to be careful with this prisoner. He ran past, asking for him to stop him, and was about to raise the alarm and call for backup. The monster frowned and was indignant that he had just escaped and abandoned them. Limbs loomed over the protagonist and exclaimed that he would catch and eat this fucking warden as soon as he dealt with the prisoner. The monster thrust out his hand with bright energy, shouting that no one dares to talk about food without his permission. A powerful beam burst out towards the hero. The guy grinned and muttered that it was the claw gun again. He blocked the blow and noted that he would have been unharmed if he had stood a little closer. The young man squeezed his hand, breaking the shell. She tugged the opponent, noting that such an old-fashioned move was already boring. He easily threw the opponent to the floor. The second one took a fighting stance and looked at him. The main hero closed his eyes and clarified whether he was going to interfere with his experiments too, because he generally did not mind finishing off a couple of armored beasts, although this is a rare, protected species. The enemy stamped his paw. Limbs glared at the young man from behind and exclaimed that this attack was painless and did not leave a scratch. The youth turned around with a grin, noting that he had woken up so quickly. After all, without cultivating true ki, it was extremely difficult to damage them in a head-on collision. The monster surrounded him, asking if he had really given up, but he would not escape alive for insulting their clan of armored beasts. She grinned and noted that the sixth segment of the limb could not withstand the load if bent in the opposite direction. The eyes were especially sensitive to light, and in the fourth segment of the spine there was a small hole hidden by the shell. The enemy frowned and asked how he knew this. The youth swung his hand sharply, cutting off the enemy's limb, and answered if that was really a secret. The demon opened its mouth and screamed in pain. Limbs looked at the boy, muttering that the weak points of the hands and eyes were insignificant, but who told him about the hidden vulnerability of the spine, and the hero replied that he had dissected 200 or 300 armored monsters, so he most likely understood their anatomy better than they did, but what he remembered most was the dry, tough and bitter meat of their kind, extremely unpleasant to eat. The young man arched his eyebrows and added that, frankly speaking, for a martial artist, using the opponent's weak points was a particularly shameful tactic, and if anyone found out about it, he would definitely be made a laughingstock. The enemy swung and replied that it was not too late to fight with honor. The boy grinned and noted that no one was watching here, so he could kill them all and no one would know about his shameful act. The prison building. The warden was pushing one of the rebels, demanding that he walk faster. The man gritted his teeth and muttered that he was wrong about him, since power and money had changed him so much that he betrayed his friends. Xiuying grinned and replied that if they were friends, he should be glad to do him a favor, so let him calm down and help, remembering his wife and newborn son. The interlocutor jerked towards him, shouting that he would kill him. The monster swung his paw. He pressed the rebel to the ground and asked what he wanted to do with his faithful slave, thanks to whom he managed to catch more than 40 rebels and earn a good reward. The demon bared his teeth and asked the rebel army's liaison officer to give him the names of everyone he knew, and then he would be spared. The brunette frowned and said that he had nothing to say. The overseer turned to Limbs and noted that these people were keeping their mouths shut. They were not so easy to crack, so let him leave this task to him. Under torture, the officer would tell everything he knew. The monster lifted the prisoner and sneered that Xiang was so cruel with his appearance that he liked him more and more, so this time he would entrust him with all the rebels that were captured. The brunette frowned and cursed Xiang, saying that his thirst for power would be his undoing, and he would be devoured by his greed and die in agony. At this moment, the warden slammed the remote control onto the table. He grabbed his head, not understanding why he was recalling the past now, and the maintenance staff had become completely lazy, since the communication system that was damaged during the war had not yet been restored, and even the phones were not working, and the prison alarm had also been destroyed in the recent battle and was not functioning at all. An explosion rang out. The man turned around, realizing that he had to hurry, and exclaimed that he had never seen such a capable martial artist before, who could defeat 2 C-rank monsters by himself. Xiang sweated and muttered that there was the slightest chance that the demons would be defeated, considering that he could not count on outside help, only death awaited him. He slammed his fists on the table and shouted that this was simply ridiculous, because the warden had done so much to become the head of the prison, and he had not yet reached the top of his career. His life had just begun. The man shuddered and noted that there was hope, because there was still a temporary alarm system for testing in Block A. Floodlights were shining from behind one of the prison buildings. Suddenly, a powerful explosion was heard in this place. The students looked at Xian in surprise and asked if he really wanted them to escape themselves, and leave Qi and Guangxian to their fate. The red-haired man frowned and replied that the main character was a brave man without common sense, who had killed the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which was why their plan had failed and they had been imprisoned, and the bespectacled man was simply a two-faced pedant, who had dared to climb into hell with a couple of classmates just to save a friend, and this was a disaster. Because the student's actions would only lead to the comrades who had trusted him losing their lives in vain. The interlocutor looked at him with displeasure, and exclaimed that he was simply afraid of dying himself, and was hiding behind his speeches. Xian grinned and agreed, saying that he wanted to live, and now was their chance, since there were riots and explosions everywhere in the prison, and Qi and Guangxian had once again played heroes and attracted the attention of the guards. The guy turned around and said that it was up to them to decide whether to stay here and go to the bottom with them or not. One of the students came out and said that he would go with him, which caused the indignation of another young man. 2 students had already passed him, saying that they wanted to live, and that their relatives were waiting for them at home. Xian grinned and said that there was no need to feel guilty because of the fear of death, and it was Qi who should ask for forgiveness, and they would prepare to escape. One of the guys went to the door and exclaimed that they could get through here if they broke it down together. Suddenly, the warden kicked him sharply and threw the guy back. The students froze in fear, looking at their comrade. The man looked at them and muttered that they were unlucky to meet him, but so be it, he would soften their punishment for the service. Xian looked at the brunette and muttered that they were just scared because of the explosions. Xiang passed by and said that many people would not be needed, but he would finish off anyone who did not follow him. The student rushed after him, promising that he would do everything to help him. The monster's body flew into pieces. The red-haired man's eyes widened and he screamed. The warden gritted his teeth and muttered that these stupid demons were killed too quickly. The protagonist slammed the monster into the ground, sitting on top of it. Xian stared at his classmate in shock, assuming that he had become so strong because of the experiment. Qi straightened up and noted with a smile that now there was no man or beast left who could stop them. The man spread his arms and promised that he would cooperate with him, release all his comrades and provide them with temporary shelter to hide from the demons. But the young man replied that his only fate was to be his subject for experiments. The students looked at the hero, exclaiming that everything was fine with him, and he would save them, and the red-haired man said that the brunette was to blame for the fact that they all ended up in this prison, and now their salvation was his responsibility. Xiang pointed the sphere at Xian and ordered him to accept his offer or else the boy would die, and he immediately began to babble that he had always respected the protagonist. Qi stared at them intently and silently. The warden grabbed the student by the hair and suggested that the rebel consider a year of studying together and becoming friends. The young man waved his hand and smiled, allowing him to carry out his plan, adding that he would not fall for threats. Xiang frowned and was indignant that this monster did not care about his classmate's life at all, and the red-haired man screamed that they should not kill him, because he knew the protagonist's weak spot. The guy sweated and muttered that Guangxian was now inside the prison, and that he was more useful as a hostage, since he was the brunette's best friend. The interlocutor chuckled, noting that this bastard would sell out any comrade to save his own skin, which was almost admirable. However, the man blew his head off, saying that he hated bastards who betrayed their friends. Explosions were heard in front of the protagonist. The warden started running, saying that the guy's blood was on Chi's hands. The young man suddenly appeared behind the man, replying that it was nonsense. He dealt a powerful blow, throwing the enemy up, and said that he himself had killed the young man, but he didn't have to worry, because the guy would avenge him. Someone was walking towards the prison. The student caught up with the bespectacled man and said that all their classmates had already escaped, and they also needed to retreat, because if the hunters from the Special Intelligence Department found out what was happening in the prison, they would be finished. But Guanxian said that he would wait for the protagonist, and he could go first. The interlocutor gritted his teeth and suggested leaving the already crazy guy alone. A powerful explosion was heard. The protagonist raised his hand and noted that breaking through mental defense 9 times in a row gives this effect, and his turtle shell is recovering more and more slowly. The warden opened his eyes. He gritted his teeth, trying to figure out how long he had been unconscious and what the hell this brat had done to him. The guy smirked, noticing that he had woken up, and suggested that he attack with all his might. The man roared and stood up, mentally outraged that this bastard continued to insult him, considering him his toy. Xiring swung, thinking that the youth had countless chances to finish him off, but he did not, so the path continued to laugh, but he would kill him with one blow. The man froze in front of the calm face of the protagonist, feeling that he could not move. Tears welled up in his eyes from the understanding that the enemy was right in front of his nose, but he could not do anything. The overseer shook and asked what he had done to him, and the guy replied that he had done nothing. The hero clenched his opponent's fist and said that he was like a hare frozen in front of a falcon, or a sheep in front of a lion, because fear is a biological instinct, and his body resists commands and wants to be as far away from the guy as possible. The interlocutor cried, muttering that he could still fight, and would kill him. She arched an eyebrow and noted that he could no longer even attack, so now he would conduct a more in-depth study of him. He extended his hand and offered to look at where exactly the hunter's mental strength comes from the dantian of the heart, stomach or head, and then added that he would be extremely careful and would not let him die so easily. Xiring's eyes widened and he screamed in horror. Blood gushed from his stomach. The protagonist stood over him, surprised that he died. Apparently, human life is truly fragile. The bespectacled man approached him, and the boy looked back, checking if everyone else had escaped. Guanxian looked at him worriedly and exclaimed that his wound was more important now. Blood suddenly spurted. The hero's body suddenly appeared to be covered in a lot of injuries, although he muttered that he was just overexcited and accidentally used too much force, and a couple of bones broke, but these were all minor things. He collapsed to the ground, saying that he would be fine after a short nap. The martial arts school hall. The blonde girl looked ahead and demanded that he not come any closer. The hunter grinned and said that he simply wanted to meet her master, the famous and unrivaled Dao. The interlocutor stood in front of him, relaying the words of the master that he did not want to meet strangers, to which the man replied that the conversation was related to his adopted son. The blonde looked at him indifferently, and repeated that her mentor did not want to see strangers, so let him go. The hunter spread his arms and laughed, loudly saying that his adopted son had killed the Minister of Foreign Affairs and would soon be executed, and the old man was afraid to show his face. He grinned and exclaimed that the former king of the Shishan underworld turned out to be a coward, timid as a mouse, and this was disappointing. Suddenly, the girl attacked sharply, and the hunter's subordinate barely managed to protect his master. The guy frowned, noticing the strength, but blocked it. The opponent struck with her foot. The brunette staggered in surprise, realizing that his mental defense was broken. The girl took out a knife and swung. The boy squeezed the hand that was emitting dark energy, and thought it was too late to stop. The blonde stepped between them, catching her hand and noting that she had an extremely bad character if she was going to kill just because she didn't like someone's words. The girl looked at him menacingly and said that anyone who insulted the master should die. The hunter raised his eyebrows and said that her older brother had killed the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and she was attacking officers of the Special Intelligence Department, so such dangerous people should be dealt with as soon as possible. The girl hit him hard between the legs. The man clenched his teeth and sweated. He let go of her hand, and she jumped back. The blonde crouched down, looking at the intruders. The hunter frowned and noted that it was evil to hit such places, and she had also taken advantage of his shock and slipped out of his hands, so it was good that he was protected by his mental power. Otherwise, his lower body functions would have already failed, and now he had a reason to kill her. The man looked back, feeling that his mental abilities were blocked, and there were at least 3 A-rank hunters nearby, ready to attack him at any moment. A man with a cigar entered the hall, saying that the guys from the Special Intelligence Department were quite brave to talk to his little sister like that. Everyone looked at the third disciple of the master and the current leader of the Black Snake Society, Xiao Roland, and the blonde man asked if his subordinate A-rank hunters were hiding nearby. Qian frowned and asked if he, as a martial artist, only used his power to oppress others. The other man smirked and replied that strength was like a fist, and the strength of his subordinates was also his strength. The guy looked at the shadow above him. Roland put his hand on his head and asked if the man didn't think so, and the pale youth asked his superior to save him. The blonde furrowed his brows and asked if he really wanted to make enemies of them. The man put out his cigar on the brunette's forehead and replied that they were not worthy of it, just a wild mongrel who got lucky and wanted to shit on them. Besides, why did he think that the strength he had accidentally obtained could be compared to the Black Snake's accumulated society for decades at the Ming Xian martial arts school? Roland pressed the guy's head into the floor with his foot and said that he had been patient until now, but now he should get out. Qian frowned and said that he was here on behalf of the Special Intelligence Department in the name of maintaining order and justice, and the martial arts schools should answer for Qi's misdeeds. The other man looked at him indifferently and noted that the young boy had gotten carried away and made mistakes, but at his age, the man had the blood of hundreds of people on his hands. The blonde man grimaced and exclaimed that they couldn't compare, because the young man had killed the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the hunter had good reason to believe that he had collaborated with the rebels to disrupt the peace talks. The other man lifted his chin and asked if there was any evidence, since the agreement had been signed anyway. Qian frowned and replied that evidence didn't matter, even the connection between Qi and the rebel army didn't matter, but if the man didn't hand over control of the Black Snake Society, the student's life would be in danger, and the Ming Xian Martial Arts School and its masters would be involved. The warrior took a step forward and noted that the hunter simply wanted the Black Snake Society. He leaned over the blonde and asked what group was covering for him, to which he was told that it didn't matter and that he just needed to talk to his master in person. Roland's eyes flashed and he laughed, repeating the guest's words. Qian furrowed his brows and asked what was so funny about needing to talk to his master. The other man looked at him menacingly and exclaimed that to monsters and powerful groups, a man was just a cheap disposable tool, so how could a tool negotiate with people? He smiled and told Longhe, an A-rank hunter and director of the Special Intelligence Department, that his head was only worth 50 bits on the black market. The blonde smirked and agreed that he was a cheap bastard, but added that the price for Qi's head was much higher. Roland leaned over and said that he would greet his friend when he was released, since he just wanted to have some fun and rest in jail, to which the hunter replied that the guy was in Blackgate prison. The leader of the Black Snake widened his eyes and asked if he was in his right mind. The blonde smirked and added that the man should understand what was happening in this prison now, so how long could the young man last there? Roland grabbed the man by the chest and exclaimed that if something happened to Qi, even 10 of his deaths would not be enough to cover it. The interlocutor smirked and replied that he was ready for it, but it was time for him and his master to choose, so let him give up the Black Snake Company, and then he would let the protagonist leave right now. Suddenly, a soldier ran into the gate, calling Longhe. The two men looked at the commander with alarm and reported that they had just received a message that all the prisoners had escaped from the Blackgate prison. The blonde waved his hand and replied that there was no need to panic. These students must have managed to escape with someone's help. Perhaps this was their chance to curry favor and reveal their connection with the rebels or the Black Snake Society. The subordinates sweated and said that the students had escaped by themselves, and they had also killed the prison warden, and based on the current evidence, there was no outside help. Longhe's eyes widened. His face was distorted in horror and confusion. Two soldiers were dragging the injured man after the conversation. The blonde followed them. The girl standing next to Roland asked why they didn't just kill them all. The man crossed his arms and replied that it was wrong to take someone's life within the walls of the master's martial arts school, and first they had to find out about Longhe and the consortium that gave him this order, and the blonde muttered that it was so boring. Roland narrowed his eyes and explained that they should be more careful, and advised the girl to control herself, use her head more, and learn from him. The girl looked up and said that the master had specifically instructed her not to learn from him because the man was a coward, and those who practiced martial arts were supposed to show courage. The man raised his hands in an offended manner and explained that he was terribly worried about the safety of the school, and did she know how many people were coveting their wealth and opportunities? To which the girl muttered that if only the elder brother and second elder sister were still here, no one would dare to encroach on them. Roland covered her mouth with his hand, looking around, and exclaimed that even though the master was in the bedroom, he could still hear them. The girl looked at him and said that the master had gone out, and had not returned to the school for several days. The interlocutor sweated and asked never to mention these traitors in front of the master in the future, because every time he gets angry, he starts beating him or Qi. The blonde turned around and decided that she should go with the weak protagonist, otherwise, if he dies, the master will be upset. Roland closed his eyes and asked not to create more problems, and he himself will look for the guy, hoping that he will stay alive and will not cause trouble anymore, and then added that for some reason there is not a single person in the school for whom you do not have to worry. The protagonist remembered himself in childhood, when he was asked what he was looking at, and the young man answered with a smile that these were Taoist records about reincarnation, which said that this curious technique is practiced only after death. Yuan walked up to him, leaving behind the defeated enemies, and asked if this was the martial arts technique they found in the Red Lotus sect, adding that if it worked, the cultists they beat up would have resurrected to fight them again. Chi furrowed his brows and exclaimed that he should have figured it out himself, but he was almost tricked. The blonde man smiled and pointed out that he was only confused because he desired martial arts techniques too much, and must have exchanged the points he earned from defeating the Red Lotus sect members for martial arts. The protagonist furrowed his brows and replied that they were really too greedy in the courtyard, and after eliminating so many Red Lotus cultists, he could only exchange 3 mediocre second-rate techniques, because the number of points needed to obtain superior martial arts was astronomical. The interlocutor looked at him and said that the court allowed the exchange of techniques, which guarantees their authenticity, the absence of errors and missing information in the texts, and they even provide special masters for explanation and guidance. This is an incredibly rare concession from the imperial court, and the brunette asked if this had not happened in the past. Yuan gestured with his hand and replied that the imperial army had many martial artists, and with the military formations, they were far superior to other martial arts sects on the battlefield, and in the past, when the cultists were pushing the refugees to rebel, the imperial army could easily deal with them, but this situation was different, and the imperial court hired martial arts sects, even masters without sect affiliation like the two of them, to deal with the Red Lotus cultists, yet the imperial army did almost nothing, which was extremely strange. The protagonist looked away and muttered that this was all too difficult, and as long as he could gain martial arts and become stronger, he would continue to be happy. Several people were approaching them. Yuan narrowed his eyes and noticed that someone was coming. The protagonist smiled, guessing that they were more Red Lotus cultists, who he could earn more points from. The friend looked back and said that they were just refugees who had been enchanted by the sect, and they had never practiced martial arts, so there would be no points for killing them. The exhausted people approached, lamenting that the envoys were dead because of them. Chi shrugged and said that the foolish humans should thank him for saving them from the hands of the Red Lotus, and now they could go home. The men looked at him with displeasure and said that they did not understand anything, because destruction was coming, and only the Red Lotus sect could protect and feed them, and they did not need their salvation. The protagonist smirked and said that he did not need permission to save them, because as a powerful man, he could do whatever he wanted. The man on the ground suddenly shuddered. The thin man pointed his finger at him. The corpse rose with red eyes, and the refugees said that they should be wary of those bastards who insulted the Red Lotus, not him. Suddenly, the one who had risen from the dead jumped up sharply and chopped off their heads. He prepared to attack the young men, standing in front of them. The protagonist grinned enthusiastically and exclaimed that this was not an illusion, and the deceased Red Lotus cultist really came back to life, which means that the Taoist records of reincarnation and the cultivation technique that can only be practiced after death are real. Yuan calmly strikes with his sword. The hero strikes straight at the enemy. He looks ahead in surprise and sees that he is not even scratched. The villain counterattacks. Yuan jumps back and the blow hits the ground. Chi realizes that his chance has come. He strikes the enemy in the stomach. He looks ahead in disbelief. The villain stands in front of him as if nothing had happened. Yuan and the protagonist prepare for a new wave of attack. The white-haired one tells his partner how he defeated him before. The tired-looking guy states that this guy has been cultivating external abilities only, so his skin, bones and muscles are incredibly developed, and to finish him off, he used true ki in a final blow aimed at his heart, and after his revival, he became more resilient and much stronger, and even true ki barely penetrated his body. Yuan calmly looks ahead and assures that apparently there is only one choice left, namely, retreat. The partners run away. Chi furiously asks to slow down. Believing that this is a joke, he replies that he is already running extremely slowly. The protagonist screams loudly, asking how he can be so fast, although he does not use true ki. Yuan lands down. Chi asks to wait. The people run away, screaming that the two came for them and the messenger is breathing down their necks. They are dealt a powerful blow while they were claiming that this is a monster. The monster runs behind them. There is a strong explosion after the villain hits the wall. Chi jumps back and standing next to Yuan says that he is not lagging behind. His partner replies that they need to forget and not run. If it comes to an endurance competition, they will be the first to use up all their strength. The protagonist says with a smile that this is great, asking if the white-haired man is ready to act. He calmly looks at him, not understanding what he is talking about. The protagonist spreads his hands and asks not to pretend, because although he constantly uses only basic blade techniques, his behavior and appearance clearly give him away as the heir to a prestigious family. Because in books it is always like this, a genius student hiding his true identity, wanders the world and deliberately does not use the fighting techniques of his sect. Chi enthusiastically says that on his way, a genius meets a reliable friend, but having learned the whole truth, his comrade begins to feel inferior, and at some point their paths diverge, asking if Yuan is worried about this. The white-haired man stands opposite and says that it never even occurred to him. The protagonist asks what is stopping him then. Chi points his finger and shouts that no matter what the reason, They are in a terrible situation and they need to quickly show their invincible martial arts skills to destroy that revived monster. Yuan says with a straight face that he can't, because the master said that if he wants to surpass his predecessors and reach the peak of martial arts, he should not use true ki at this stage of cultivation. The protagonist asks again in shock, clarifying if this is really more important than life, because if they can't handle the revived guy, they are finished. Yuan stands with a sword and states that this is his personal choice and he will not drag him along, hinting that he should leave first, because even though he can't win, he will do everything possible to detain him for the sake of his partner. She says clearly with a serious expression. Yuan looks at him and states that he went the wrong way. A huge bald fighter stands in front of them. The protagonist insults him and shouts that he cannot cover him. The heroes rush to attack their enemy. A large explosion occurs. The events take place an hour later. Drops of blood are visible on the ground. It is said that as expected, this is impossible and no matter how much they beat the enemy, the attacks do not cause harm. The protagonist lies face down on the ground. It is written that one hit from him leaves severe wounds and such a battle is pointless. She lies almost unconscious, realizing that the enemy should have realized this too. Tired Yuan holds a fighting stance with a sword in his hand. He fights off the enemy's attacks with one hand. She raises his head and realizes that his right arm is broken and now he can only hold the sword with his left, and even in this state he still refuses true ki, calling his partner a psycho. Yuan deftly dodges the blows. He jumps up before the enemy attacks him. He slashes the monster with his sword. She lies on the ground and does not understand what it is, noticing that it is like a dance, because he deliberately coordinates his movements with the enemy in a pair dance, and the strength of the blade has also clearly decreased. Yuan closes his eyes. While his partner wonders if he really intends to win like this, it is said that in the sutras of southern China there is a parable that one chef presented his skill in cutting up a bull to the king. The silhouette of a man hangs over the cattle. It is said that his blade, like flowing water, pierced the body of the cattle, but the animal did not feel pain and the audience heard only the beautiful harmonious sound of the chef's cleaver, and by the end of the melody, the sinews and bones lay neatly to the side, and the meat smoothly descended through the air, like drops of mercury. In the picture, the meat is divided into two parts. It is written that the king asked the chief how he acquired such a remarkable skill. He answered that only by concentrating to the limit and feeling the presence of the bull with his spirit does it become possible to unite the blade with the spirit and consciously slide through the form of the animal, passing through the gap between muscle and bone. The man is kneeling before the Lord. It is written that therefore, even after 12 years and countless cattle that have passed through his hands, the blade remains without a single scratch, and one can imagine the use of this chief's ability in combat, where the target of cutting is now not a pliable bull, but a mad enemy. The picture shows a plant. The question arises, how difficult it will be, just like cutting a willow vine swaying in the wind. In the frame, a chopped feather is assumed that it will be more difficult. Yuan cuts the enemy's hand with a deft movement of the blade. He looks ahead with his eyes closed, realizing that his mind has reached its limit and can no longer withstand, and unfortunately, the time has come. In the picture, there are bright lights. He realizes that she is holding back the enemy for him. The flash is shown in the frame. He realizes that he can't sleep, because his partner won't last long, and he needs to get up and hit with the sword, like a second ago. Yuan looks in shock in front of him. The enemy without an arm stands in front of him. His flesh is electrified. Yuan sits on the ground and says that he filled the gaps between the muscles and bones of the cultist with his true ki, and he let him tear himself apart during the movement, noting that the principle is the same as in the sword technique he was now using, but with a completely opposite method of application. The protagonist holds a stand nearby, saying that he understands his partner better now, because it is so amazing. The feeling is truly worth risking your life, and it would be extremely interesting if they reach the peak of martial arts together. There are delicious bao on the table. The seller brings Yuan food and says that here is his order of 10 hot bao. He replies that they are not enough and they need to bring 2 more bowls of noodle soup with beef. Do not add green onions and hurry up. The worker awkwardly says that he will pass everything on to the kitchen now. She sits opposite and asks why he eats so much. He replies that without using true ki, both fighting and healing absorb more energy. He eats bao and says that it is not that he really likes to eat. She leafs through the menu and wonders why his master forbade the use of ki, because as the best expert, he can fight without using it, and he does not understand why it is impossible to reach the peak of martial arts if you use true ki. Yuan sits opposite him with a smile and states that in ancient legends there are mentions of a huge fish and its meat is very tasty, and its size reaches 1,000 meters in length. Although it is not so tasty, it has no natural enemies, so it lives comfortably among the sea, and when the wind rises, it spreads its wings and rises to the sky on this power. The picture shows a large whale. Yuan asks what he thinks of such a creature. She with a smile says that he is free, enviably free. Yuan notes that without the protection of the sea, he would become only a delicacy on their table, and without the mighty wind, he cannot fly. She holds the menu and hears that martial artists seek the strongest martial arts techniques and cultivate powerful ki, clarifying that if there were no techniques in true Ki, would they cease to exist? The protagonist with a serious look asks him to think about it, because he confused him. Yuan holds up a bow and says that techniques in true Chi can make them stronger, but they are only tools, asking if he can repeat the move he used to defeat the Red Lotus cultist. He replies that he tried several times, but it never worked. The white-haired man looks at his interlocutor and says that perfecting this move should be the direction in which he should develop, and he needs to throw away this brochure with the exercises of the Red Lotus sect of unknown origin, because the techniques of the sect may make him stronger in a hurry. But with them come huge flaws and dangers. The dreams of the peak of martial arts will only become an obstacle on his way. The protagonist smiles and says that this is the path of a friend, but not his, because his starting point is completely different from his own, since the strong humiliate the weak, and the only way to survive is to fight with all your might, and he will not refuse anything that can make him stronger. Yuan calls this a pity, because he only talked about the peak of martial arts. He holds up a notepad and states that he can now answer his previous question. She smirks and states that even if martial techniques and Ki suddenly disappear from this world one day, martial arts will continue to exist, because swinging a sword is a martial art, punching is a martial art, biting an enemy with your teeth is the same thing. She smirks and states that true Ki is also a martial art just like techniques, and he will study and understand everything there is to know about martial arts, and use each of them. A guy is lying on the mattress. He opens his eyes and cannot understand why he is suddenly dreaming about the past. A man sits next to him and says that his friend left this note. He gives him the paper. The protagonist reads that he will go buy food and come back. He should wait for him there. Then he asks the man what this place is. The old man looks at him and says that this is the Western subway station. That was its name until the railway tracks in this area were destroyed by the war. The protagonist stands in the middle of sleeping bags and asks if they really live like this. Because this place smells terrible and even prison was better. He replies that he does not live here because he has a good life. Because 6 months ago his house was blown up and all his savings were in it. Surprised, she expresses his condolences. They look at another man. The old man explains that he is still doing well. But the man next to him, when the war came, he lost his job and could not pay the mortgage. His house is still standing, but it was forcibly sold at auction, and due to the fall of the real estate market, the proceeds from the sale were not enough to cover the debt, and now he has to close the loan every month. The homeless man, sitting by the bags, says that someone is probably worse off than that man, specifying where the protagonist went. He holds his hand to his ear and says that he has to go, and will come back and listen to his stories. Transport rushes along the tracks. The protagonist looks ahead and feels that Manhwa's voice came from there. She runs on and hears a conversation where a man demands money from another, and he replies that he should find someone else. He in turn says that he recognized his student uniform and how dare he kill a diplomat. The guy runs forward. In the distance, a conversation is heard about how the interlocutor should be in prison now, and not here, and that if he goes to a special intelligence department and turns him in, at that moment he doesn't care. The guy again says that the knife is in his hand and if he doesn't want to get hurt, he just needs to give the money. The other refuses. The knife in the guy's hands is shaking. He exclaims how the other took it. The other apologizes and says that he was wrong. Blood is visible on the tip of the blade. He stands in front of the lying body. The guy asks about the fact that he figured it out himself, and this is his first corpse. Guangxian clenches his teeth and says that he didn't want to kill anyone and everything went wrong. The main character says with a grin that the guy is just a local scumbag and nothing terrible happened. Guangxian lowers his head and states that the Western subway station is a meeting place with the rebel army, and now they are not here. Because they abandoned them and no one will save them, there are no options left. The events unfold in the hangars. The blonde stands in front of the dead guy and asks if all the surveillance cameras were destroyed and what kind of coincidence is this. Because the martial arts school did not take any action and therefore there was no reason to kill the overseer. The assistant approaches him and addresses him as Director Qian, saying that they have recovered some data from the cameras and she killed the overseer and the armored beasts. He asks again in disbelief. The guy looks at him and states that perhaps he originally hid his strength as a martial artist or probably temporarily awakened as a hunter, and the recovered part of the surveillance footage is too short to say anything for sure at the moment. With the broken building in the background, he explains that the state of the prison suggests that the battle was long and Qi's sharp reflexes allowed him to dodge most of the attacks, which proved to be a key factor in his victory. However, his attack power is low, making it difficult for him to deal effective damage to his opponents, and the overall assessment is that the protagonist's strength is equivalent to a relatively powerful C-rank hunter. Qian looks at him with displeasure and asks if the logistics team didn't treat the burn on his head. The other man angrily points to his forehead and states that he himself refused treatment and will not remove this scar until he finishes off Ruolin and destroys the Mingxin martial arts school. The director throws up his hands and remarks that he is ambitious. But today is already late, and he is not a heartless boss who makes his subordinates work overtime when they are sick, so he can go back and rest. The guy grits his teeth and wonders if there really is time for this, since the students have escaped from the prison and they don't know anything about their whereabouts, and the plan to take over the Black Snake Society could fail at any moment. Qian lights a cigarette and says that there is no need to worry, the advantage is still on their side, and from the beginning he placed spies to monitor the prison from a distance, and if the rebels or the Black Snake Society rescue the students, his agents will follow them to their lair and drag them out into the light. The guy stands in front of him and says that the students escaped on their own, without any outside help, and he replies that although the probability is low, he has taken into account the possible developments. Qian smirks and says that if the students escape from the prison on their own, the agents will secretly follow a few key students, and those guys will definitely contact someone for help. The surprised ward asks if they will really contact the rebels or the Black Snake Society, since the probability of this is extremely high, and he understands that the director pretended to plan in front of Roland to deliberately show weakness. The director, with a cigarette in his mouth, assures that victory or defeat is not important now, and as long as the enemy lets down his guard and allows the Black Snake Society to make mistakes, the final victory will be theirs. The fighters approach them and shout the boss's name, saying that new information has come in. Suspicious bodies have been found a kilometer away from the prison. The picture shows the bodies of the dead in bags. The director is standing in front of them. He is surprised, saying that these are his spies. The events unfold in a luxurious mansion. The tall guy asks his sister why she came so late. She replies that she does not have to report to him. He smirks and says that he is worried about her, because there are vagrants, rebels, hungry animals on the streets, and anything can happen. She smiles and notices that he is worried about her, and that this is something new, wondering if he was not afraid that she would fight for the inheritance. The guy, smirking, says that this is already in the past and her father has decided on her marriage and the date has already been set and agreed upon by the parties. The girl asks if her father will really allow her to marry a monster. A tall guy stands in front of her and declares that if this is the case, then they are no longer rivals, and if she marries a monster, she will never inherit the fund, and what's more, her marriage will become the cornerstone of the family's prosperity. He whispers in her ear with an ominous smile that she should take better care of her body before the wedding, and no matter what, she will still contribute to the family. Then he laughs loudly. The action takes place in a night garden. The girl is sitting alone and looking at the fountain. A guy in a red tie comes up to her from behind and tells Jia to tell the chairman about her plan, because if he finds out about her plans, he will definitely call off the engagement and make her the heir of the family. She replies that she has long known about the marriage. The guy, in disbelief, asks if she is really giving up the status of heiress of her own free will. Jia looks forward and says that her father will never allow her to become an heiress, not because of her abilities, but because of her gender. The guy stands next to her and says that the chairman has always cared and treated her and the young master fairly. She says that for the sake of the opinions of others, after all, the position in society is very important. Jia smirks and asks him not to make such a face and not to pity her, because she does not care about the family, and she herself will take what she wants, and it is better to get down to business, because the interlocutor must have something important, since he is here at such an hour. The guy looks at her and claims that there are problems in the prison. The boss and the monsters were killed by Dao's adopted son, and the students escaped. She smirks and calls out the protagonist's name, asking that this fool of a scapegoat was able to kill a C-class monster. The man looks at her and states that maybe he is hiding his power, or maybe there was a breakthrough in the prison and he awakened as a hunter, and at the moment, Chi's power is estimated to be at the peak of C-class, but not yet at B rank. Jia points out with a serious face that he is just a supporting character after all, asking if there is any news from the Special Intelligence Department about the escaped student. The man looks down and states that other than Chi, the whereabouts of the others are unknown. All of the river spies were killed and he does not know who did it, and fortunately, he assigned one of his men to monitor Chi, so he has not been exposed yet. Jia stands up and asks again, stating that the spies who were monitoring the students are dead, but their man is monitoring the protagonist, and he is still alive, hinting that this is clearly not luck. The pink-haired girl stands in front of him and claims that they are also being followed and someone is trying to figure them out. The guy looks at her and says that the Black Snake Society and the Resistance cannot follow them and that it is possible that this is a completely different syndicate. Jia smiles and says that the murder of the Minister of Foreign Affairs is a big deal, and that it is only natural that someone is following him, which is why she is using Chi to make everyone think that he is an important person and then he will become the center of attention, not them. The interlocutor asks in surprise that apparently he is not important. The girl explains that by becoming the culprit of the murder of the Minister of Internal Affairs, he has fulfilled his most important mission and it is necessary to pass the task to Chi from the Special Intelligence Department, noting that it is necessary to tell Qian that this is his last chance and that he knows what to do. Jia with an ominous look assures that one hunter or a C-class martial artist will not affect their plan in any way and that they must not forget about the original goal of destroying the resistance and capturing its leader. Everything else is unimportant. The action takes place underground. The protagonist asks the other to wake up. He stands next to Guanxian and says that the people in this world are so fragile, got a little excited and immediately passed out. Qi, crossing his arms, realizes that he is fine now anyway, and so he should look at how he has changed, then states that assuming that he really died while unconsciously practicing the reincarnation technique, he will no longer be able to practice martial arts techniques to cultivate true Qi. He looks at his palm and states that external martial arts that can refine the body look simpler. He should start with the most simple, the iron sand palm. He blazes with fire, thinking that special materials are needed for training, namely, 5 bags of iron sand and a potion. There is a vat on the stove. He realizes that a heated iron pot is all that is needed. The protagonist looks at it with a smirk, realizing that it is right in front of him. She delivers a strong blow to the sand. Everything around him is flying apart. He understands that the hard and fine iron sand, the increasing heat. The protagonist hits the vat with sand. It is written that all this is not real and was invented by Qi, but the imagination has power, specifying how much the human imagination can influence the body. A guy with a knife stands opposite another. It is said that one day a scientist conducted an experiment on a death row prisoner. They tied him up so that he could not move, and then they made a small cut on his wrist and put a small aluminum vessel under his arm. The guy touched his hand with a knife. It is explained that the cut was superficial. Only the first layers of skin were affected, but it was enough for him to believe that his veins were cut and a vessel with a small valve was placed under him, regulating the passage of liquid in the form of drops. Water drips into the bowl. The convict could hear the dropper and read every drop of what he considered his blood. The convict lies on the couch in shock. It is said that after a while, the scientist closed the valve until the test subject saw that he believed that he had run out of blood, and in a few minutes his face lost color, his heartbeat accelerated, then his heart stopped and he died, and the scientist proved that everything we perceive affects the body and psyche. The convict jerks his hand. It is explained that the spirit and body are one, wondering what if the power of imagination is used in the practice of martial arts. The protagonist stands with a smirk. Fire blazing from his hands, he declares that the iron sand palm test of the second level has been passed. His fingers are smoking. He declares that this is a terrifying cultivation speed, and if it were not for the fact that his body could not withstand too fast a transformation, he would be able to continue cultivating the iron sand palm to a higher level. The protagonist looks down and realizes that this has increased the offensive power of the palm and now needs to improve the defense of the whole body, realizing that he needs to practice the golden bell shield. The picture shows a wooden mallet being used by 4 martial artists. The warriors are standing with hammers. One of them swings and hits him. Many blows are dealt to his entire body. It is said that the first level golden bell is completed, and the next one is an iron hammer. A huge monster is already standing with another weapon. The protagonist provokes him to attack, saying that iron is no match for a trained body. The fighter deals a powerful blow with a hammer to the guy. The surprised partner asks Qi what he is doing. The protagonist lies in a crack and exclaims that he has finally woken up, stating that he himself practices martial arts and can teach Guanxian. The surprised guy clarifies, isn't it different to learn them? The picture shows a bright red jacket. The protagonist asks in surprise if he really bought him this suit, noting that he has good taste. Guanxian stands in front of him and says that if they don't change their clothes, they will be easily found, as they are too conspicuous in their school uniforms, and it would be better to throw away their previous clothes. The protagonist puts on his jacket and says that it is prudent, asking why he doesn't consider learning kung fu. Guanxian looks at him and asks how long it will take him to learn it and defeat an opponent like the chief. The protagonist tells his partner that he is only averagely skilled, so it will take about 3 years. Guanxian looks down and says that 3 years is enough to defeat a C-class hunter. Learning martial arts won't save them. There are hunters up to S rank and thousands of other monsters in the Special Intelligence Department. The protagonist gets dressed and asks what's wrong. The protagonist claims that he gave up and feels like they can't change anything. Guanxian looks down and says that the resistance has abandoned them. If they are caught by the special star or monsters, they can only hope for an easy death, and he doesn't even know if he will live to see tomorrow. The protagonist understands him and asks what his next step is. Guanxian purses his lips and says that he will leave the Western Hills and find a safe place, telling him to blame him as much as he wants because he let down his classmates and him. The protagonist says with a smile that he will follow him. The guy with glasses stands next to him and asks again. The protagonist says that he will see him off and make sure he is safe, and after that he will come back and kill monsters. The partner laughs and calls him a man, because the more he is beaten, the stronger he becomes, then says that he thanks him for his kindness, but traveling away from the border can be more dangerous than staying here, and he does not want to involve him in this. The protagonist pulls him along and claims that he saved his life twice, and he will not be able to sleep at night if he does not pay him. Guanxian excitedly shouts that when they approach the border, they will need to pay the guides for the road, and the boss does not have much money in his wallet, and after buying clothes there is nothing left. As soon as he collects enough money, he will definitely contact him. She looks away and asks if this is really a problem. They continue along the tunnel. Dark energy forms in their place. A character appears from it. The guy with the mark says that he has a keen sense of smell, and passing by, she stopped for a second and almost found his shadow. The director stands next to him and asks what they are doing now. He replies that they changed their clothes and left, and his shadow cannot transmit sound, so he does not know where they are going. Qian says nothing with a smirk, ordering them to keep their shadow at a distance, let it follow them from afar. The guy with the mark objects, why don't they just arrest the protagonist? Qian looks away and states that the dead spies are outside the prison, asking who he thinks did this. The guy suggests that it is some kind of big council. The blonde looks at him and says that maybe that is true, and if they do something rash, they will become victims of high-level politics, and all they can do now is wait for a chance until she makes a mistake, and only then can they arrest him. The ward stands in front of him and is indignant, saying that killing a minister, then a prison warden, and escaping from prison should be enough grounds. The director replies that they will all be classified as crimes committed by a group of university students, and she is Dao's adopted son, and given the social status of the martial arts school and the Black Snake Society, he will be fine after paying a fine. The guy clenches his fist and insults them in rage, noting another accusation like the death of the foreign minister. Qian grabs him by the neck and shouts what's the rush, asking if he wants to be killed too, because he works for a secret intelligence service and has no brains, and they are probably being watched now, so nothing can be done. The guy looks ahead and exclaims that she has stopped in front of a subway car, then notices that something is wrong, because there is a financial company there, and it looks like an illegal underground credit company. The principal lets him go and insults him, saying that she is the young master of the Black Snake Society and does not need to borrow money, ordering his ward to hurry up and give a list of all the branches of the Black Snake. The guy takes the notebook and sadly says that everything is here. Qian leafs through it and says that he found it, explaining that this is a subsidiary of the Black Snake gang, and their last chance has apparently been missed. The guy with the mark looks at the principal and says that he is too pessimistic, because until she returns, anything can happen. The principal looks down and with a serious face states that the protagonist is deliberately contacting Roland or Dao through a small and insignificant company, and when everything is settled and the identity of the culprit is revealed, returning to school will be the safest option, and it seems that they have already lost. The subway car is in the tunnel. The blonde guy sits slumped in his seat and asks if he is ready, because after signing this loan agreement they will come at the agreed time and will pay back the loan with interest no matter what. The poor guy stands in front of him and thanks him for the loan, assuring him that he will never be late with the interest payments. He smirks and says that there is one more thing that needs to be done before signing the agreement. The poor guy stands in front of him and asks him fearfully what needs to be done. He whispers in his ear not to move. The thug approaches him. The guy asks what their boss Raymond is doing, who says that apparently his partner just came to work today and must be seeing this for the first time. The guard fearfully assumes that this is a lie detector test and pretends to sniff the other guy's body to put pressure on him and make sure that he is really capable of paying. Raymond smiles and says that Raymond's boss is sniffing his pheromones. The fighter asks again in surprise. The bouncer claims that he does not know the details, but he insists that there are only 3 sexes in the world: Alpha, Beta, Omega. The man points to his neck and says that the Alpha and Omega have a gland on the back of their heads that secretes pheromones, and the boss wants to use them to find a unique Omega as a life partner. The frightened guard clarifies that the Omega can be a man and it doesn't matter, even if it's a guy. The fighter turns around and asks what he's afraid of, because Raymond is not interested in him, because he checked them all before starting work, and they are all betas. Raymond stands behind the poor man and tells his subjects to bring money, because he just sniffed this guy and he smells like milk, so they need to give him money, because he won't run away. The guards stand opposite. One of them smiles and says that he understands and will do everything now. Suddenly, the guy falls from the ceiling right on top of them. Raymond, with a serious face, calls it interesting, because he can't believe that someone dared to come to his house and make a mess. The beaten warrior lies near the others and tells the boss that he couldn't stop him. The protagonist stands near Guangxian and asks if it's true that you can borrow money here, demanding to be served without waiting in line, because they are in a hurry. The events took place a year ago. The girl is sitting on the couch. A blonde guy is sitting in a chair. Behind him is another guy. She says that he really is something. The first day in prison, and already a fight with prisoners, where 5 people were injured. One of them was seriously injured and sent to a regular hospital for treatment. Raymond sits and with a dissatisfied face says that it happened this way, because he warned them that he was in a susceptible state, but they continued to provoke him. The doctor with dark hair sits opposite and clarifies what it means to be in a susceptible state. Raymond points to his neck with a grin and explains that at his age, about 3 times a year, the glands on the back of his head uncontrollably release pheromones, and during this period he becomes irritable, hot-tempered and destructive. This is aggravated by the smell of Omega pheromones, which is why he asks to be placed in solitary confinement and provided with the appropriate medication. The guard stands behind him and begins to laugh loudly, asking what will happen next, clarifying whether he is really hinting that men can get pregnant. Raymond turns with an ominous look and asks if he really wanted to die. The guard's legs give way. He looks ahead in fear. The man is already holding the door a few meters away from him and realizes that for a second the desire to run away has appeared. The guard clenches his teeth in rage and shouts that the insolent boy probably does not know what happens when you threaten a prison guard. The girl sits near them and asks Officer Yuan to leave because he is disturbing her work. He tells Dr. Lu that this prisoner is very dangerous. She turns to him again with a sweet smile and asks him to wait outside the door. The guard comes out the door and happily says that if she needs anything, she can just say. The door slams loudly. Raymond sits motionless on the chair next to her and tells the doctor that she occupies a very high position and even the guard was afraid of her. She replies that it does not matter, because she is a doctor here, and he is a patient, and she will help as much as she can. The blonde looks at her in surprise and asks if she really wants to help him, because in the evening he filled out an application for medications, then he asks to give him them from the list, and also antidepressants that he will name. Lu glances at him and says that she read his application and it contains from generally available to prohibited drugs and she can contact a higher hospital only if she can confirm his symptoms. Raymond is furious and screams at them to at least give him a solitary confinement cell, calling this prison strange, because they have combined an Omega and an Alpha, assuring him that he cannot live with them during his period of receptivity, because he is causing them harm. Dr. Lu sits nearby and reads about a naked man, whose clothes are torn, multiple bites, bleeding. He specifies that his first victim before he went to prison was also associated with a period of receptivity. Raymond replies that it was his first period in adulthood, when he went to the hospital to get a prescription for the necessary suppressant, but the doctor examined him and did not prescribe anything. On the way back he lost control of himself. Lu writes down with a smile and specifies that at the hospital they did an X-ray and if he had waited half a day, he would have been able to see the results, that there is no gland on the back of his head that secretes pheromones. Raymond scratches his neck which is emitting purple particles. He realizes that it is most likely a fault in the equipment, and although she cannot feel it, his pheromones are spreading throughout the room. Lu smiles and states that unfortunately he cannot feel anything, asking if he has any other proof that they exist. Raymond leans back and starts laughing, exclaiming that a strong alpha can use them to suppress a lesser alpha, and he is the highest and the 5 prisoners who faced him today were all alphas and were defeated by the pheromones, while he remained unharmed and the guard was subconsciously scared of his presence. Lu looks at him and suggests that maybe it is because they are afraid of him, thinking that he is a criminal, a man capable of causing harm without remorse. Raymond starts to get angry, asking if she really does not believe him. The girl puts her palm to her chest and assures that she is sure that he is not lying to her, but what he considers common sense may be slightly different from reality. Listing Alpha, Beta, Omega, she asks when he first thought that there are only 3 genders in the world. Raymond clenches his teeth and says that on the 15th of last month, on the day of his coming of age, the world changed overnight. He states that historically, socially, economically, politically there was no difference, and it seems that all that has changed is people's perception of gender. Dr. Lu stands next to the dejected blonde and understands that he is upset and subjectively he is not trying to hurt people, because he simply cannot control his mind and behavior, concluding that he is simply sick. Raymond, sitting on a chair, shouts loudly that he is not sick, it is just that the world is wrong and becoming strange, and he feels that there may be even more dangers ahead. She hands him the papers while he is sure that he is not crazy. Raymond clutches his hair with both hands, assuring that he is normal. She turns to the patient and says that staying in prison is dangerous for him and the other prisoners, and when his mental illness is confirmed, he will be able to leave the prison and receive the necessary treatment. The alarm in the room began to scream loudly. Dr. Lu looks at it and realizes that it is an alarm, suggesting that there was a prison break. Against the background of a large prison with fences, they exclaim that the prisoners have escaped. It is said that in the year 639 according to the sacred calendar, the first hunters awakened with new abilities. The prisoners deftly jump over the fences, destroying everything around them. It is said that regardless of race, gender, everyone gained access to superpowers, even the prisoners. A fierce guy with a hand in the form of a scythe exclaims the name of Raymond, saying that here he is. A surprised Lu stands in front of him and notices that his stomach has healed, asking what happened to his arm. The distraught prisoner looks at her and states that God gave him the power to take revenge, namely to kill Raymond. Dr. Lu stands in front of the monster in fear and yells at Officer Yuan to help them. The villain states that yelling is useless, noting that the officer saw him kill 3 guards and then escape. The guy clenches his fist, saying that this is nonsense. Raymond stands in front of him furiously and states that if he wants to kill him, then go ahead. A ferocious prisoner with his hands in the form of weapons runs towards him, yelling that he is an idiot and he will cut him into pieces. He looks at his hand in surprise, not understanding what is happening, because his God-given powers have just disappeared. Bright flashes occur, indicating a fight. Raymond walks towards the door with the beaten prisoner in the background and tells Dr. Lu that he is not crazy at all. He looks forward with a smirk and says that even if a lower alpha gains strength, he cannot fight a strong alpha, and that is how the world works. The blonde suddenly feels a palm on his face. At that moment, he feels Chi pushing him to the side. The protagonist looks at his opponent with a smile and asks if he is thinking, assuring that there is no point in continuing this fight. The blonde lies on the ground in fear. Pheromones are flying around. He understands that this is impossible, because they do not work on him, and he has tried to fight alpha hunters dozens of times since he escaped from prison, and if this is an alpha, then even a B-class hunter will be completely helpless in front of him, and their bodies become weak. He looks at the red pheromones above him, and realizes that it is because they do not work, and he was unable to suppress it, noticing that they are musk pheromones, and he is also an alpha. The protagonist watches him with a smirk and asks what he is doing strange, and despite the fact that his personality and appearance are completely different, he gives him a familiar feeling, asking if he knows the master of the Red Lotus sect. Raymond sits on the floor and looks down, then asks again, not understanding what it is, because they did not come to preach to him, and he is not interested in cults. She smiles and holds his hand to the side, saying that they need to forget about it and need to get down to business, because he really came to borrow money. The blonde objects that he burst in here injured his people and now talks about it, and it seems to him that he just came to fight. She with a sinister grin offers to lend him money, and he will leave their lives as collateral, specifying how much 5 lives are worth, including Raymond and his men. The guy with the mark stands in front of the smoking director Chien and states that they are fighting. He asks again if he means Raymond and Chi. The guy with a serious face stands next to him and assures him that he is not mistaken. He replies that it is strange. How dare they speak out against the son of their boss? The guy with the mark looks at the boss and claims that these fools are the lowest level of the Black Snake gang and maybe they have never met the protagonist. But in any case, it is good. Chien with a serious face smokes a cigarette and states that it is quite the opposite. If they do not know who Chi is, then how can he not know that they are subordinates of the Black Snake? He understands that the protagonist should have realized that he is being watched, and that is why he acts together with them in order to hide his true intentions. The assistant director emits a purple glow. He says that it makes sense and warns that they have stopped fighting. Chien grabs his head and clenches his teeth, exclaiming what the protagonist is thinking. The guy with the mark looks him in the eyes and addresses him, assuming that he is simply sick in the head. The picture shows a subway car. The protagonist is sitting on a seat and tells Raymond to sit down. The blonde sits down and looks down, admitting that he is not Chi's rival, asking if he can defeat the entire Black Snake gang. The protagonist smirks and asks again what it is. The blonde looks at him with displeasure and asks how long he has lived in the Western Mountains, since he has never heard of such a gang. He asks in confusion if he should really know this. Raymond, crossing his arms, states that he can just ask someone, because the Black Snake Society is the largest underground force in the Western Mountains, clarifying whether there are still people like him in this world. The blonde offers to take his money and get out, and after 3 days he must return everything, or they will come for him. The protagonist with a dissatisfied face asks what happens. He just gives him the money. Raymond leaned back and spreading his arms to the side states that if of course he needs this money, then he can take it, and this is not such a large amount to fight for them, and wishes him not to regret, because after this, Class B and hunters will look for them one by one, and when his body is thrown into Canadianization, there will be no need to blame him for not warning. She with a dissatisfied face calls him an impossible conversationalist, and hints directly that he is not going to repay him. Raymond in a confident pose declares that his life is really not sweet, clarifying how much he wants. The main character asks with a grin how much it will cost for 3 people to travel. Raymond suspiciously clarifies that they want to escape from the Western Mountain through the border zone, calling it a large sum, and moreover, even if they get the money, they will not reach the Green Hills. There are many guides who claim to be able to get there, but most of them are scammers. She sits opposite him and calls it logical with a smile, asking if he knows a real guide who can show the way. The blonde asks him to wait, because he robbed him and wants him to introduce him to the guide, asking how dare he do this. She smiles and extends his hand and says that he is in a hurry, and if he finds him a guide, he will think about returning the debt with interest, so to speak, an additional agreement. Raymond with a displeased face cannot understand if the guy in front of him is serious, but in any case he will find him a dubious guide and kill him on the way. The protagonist, arms crossed, stands in front of him and asks if he agrees. He says that he will help him. She stands right next to him and says that they will go and maybe get to another city today. He asks again in disbelief. Raymond fearfully asks why he should go too. The protagonist with an ominous smile asks if he forgot, because she lent the road for 3 people. The blonde shouts in rage that he is a fool and imagines himself to be someone. The picture shows poor buildings against a background of skyscrapers. The frame shows a site in front of poor houses. Guanxian adjusts his glasses, standing behind the blonde, and says that an hour has passed since the appointed meeting. He replies that if they do not want to believe, they can leave, because he is forced to overpay for such urgent work. The protagonist sits on the ground and notices that someone is walking, namely 5 people in front and 5 behind, and now they are surrounded, noticing that they smell like mountain people. The blonde man with a displeased face glances and remarks that she has a good nose, because they hunted wild animals on the border between the Western Mountains and the Green Hills, the so-called poachers. The guide in brown and green clothes and a Panama hat stands in front of them and states that they know a lot about them, asking where from. Raymond looks at him with a serious face and says the phrase Star Unicorn 6. The man in the Panama glances and calls him an old friend, asking if it is true that the three of them are going into the green thicket, noting this is unusual. Then he asks if they are going to run away alone, leaving their family in the Western Mountains. Raymond stands in front of him and states that he is an orphan. Guangxian adjusts his glasses and says that his parents died in the war last year. She sits on the ground and smiles and states that he thinks he had someone, but he does not know them. The guide looks at them with a displeased face and says that they are full of arrogance, and since he knows the code word, he will give the last piece of advice, saying that this is a dangerous route, and half of the people usually die on the way. He continues to warn that the mountains are harsh, and even more dangerous are the animals and guards patrolling the border. Guangxian and Raymond stand in front of him with a serious look. The blue-haired one says that he is ready for this. The blonde one asks him to stop talking nonsense, and it is late, so they have to go. The guide turns around and with a displeased face asks him to excuse him, because he cannot accept their order, saying that tomorrow he will find them another guide, in any case, not today. The blonde man stands, spreading his arms, and shouts at him to stop, because he paid the deposit. The man in the Panama hat, and with a suspicious look assures them that he will return their money in double the amount, because he is getting old and wants to do his business safely, and the three of them do not look like ordinary refugees. The protagonist sits on the ground and smirks, clarifying that they will leave tonight if he asks them very insistently. The guide bangs his stick in rage and shouts at them to try to force him, shouting about a mustache, a roundhead, a mountain chicken. The man looks at them in fear and shouts code words about having a problem customer, one-eyed dragon, Scarface, panther. He begs them to come quickly. She watches him with a smile and asks him to stop shouting and looking at him like that. He assures them that they are not dead, just unconscious, and he will ask again that if he asks him to take this order. Raymond, arms crossed, stands with Guangxian and Qi, while the man with a trembling voice assures that he will do whatever they want. The guy in the t-shirt and hat lies on the bare ground. The Mark's underling stands next to Director Qian. He says that the protagonist and the others are leaving. The boss remarks that there is no hurry and if they get too close they will be noticed. Noticing that all 9 people are unconscious, he asks the assistant if he saw Qi do it. The Mark's guy looks down and says that he didn't see it, since he was fast and stealthy. Qian holds a pebble in his hand and states that he used small stones, controlled his strength well, and that's why everyone was only unconscious and he didn't awaken as a hunter, but practiced martial arts. Over the years Dao trained him well, Qi hid it well. The underling looks down sadly and says that the protagonist got into the conductor's car and it looks like they are ready to head across the border. He turns to the director saying that he said that they will wait for the protagonist to make a big mistake to arrest him. He clarifies whether escaping from the Western Mountain is such or not. Qian clenches his fist with a joyful grin and exclaims that this is enough now, as this is a betrayal that even the heavens will not forgive. A group of people walks along the path. Someone tells everyone to get ready, as they are leaving in 5 minutes. The protagonist turns around and asks if there are really so many people and if he can take care of them. The guide replies that there is no need to worry. He looks ahead and says that including the 3 of them, only 15 people are going with them, and some just came to say goodbye to their loved ones. The people stand to the side. The man asks his mother and father why they cannot go with them, as he cannot relax while they are here. The old man calls it stupid, as if he leaves, there will be no one to look after the chickens and ducks and no one to look after the vegetable garden. The grandmother with a sad face declares that she is used to living in the village and has never even been to the city, and Chinchio is far away, and she does not want to go there at all. The man stands in front of his father and asks them to think about it, because he has already prepared money for them, and the Western Mountain is too dangerous and it is unknown what the animals are doing. The old man asks not to worry about it, because in the village they grow their own food and so they can cope. The little girl cries and begs her grandfather and grandmother not to leave them. The grandmother hugs her and asks her not to cry, because everything will be fine, and they will definitely visit them. The guide climbs the mountain and asks for attention, stating that the time has come and they are leaving. A group of people walk along the rocks. The protagonist heads forward. Suddenly, his foot slips off the cliff. Raymond holds on and shouts in rage that he changed his mind and is now going back. She grins and tells him to stay, because he has already paid for the passage. He replies that he did not know that there would be such a steep slope. The protagonist smiles and says that he already knows their plan and if he insists on returning, he will have to kill him. Raymond angrily states that if he is so careful, he should have kept an eye on the guide, because this old man is clearly offended by him. The protagonist confidently says that he remembered his smell and that is why the guide cannot escape, and as for the blonde, he looks like the leader of the Red Lotus sect and is much more dangerous in his eyes. Enraged Raymond says that he does not know about this at all, clarifying in what sense she remembered the smell, because this old man is far ahead. The protagonist explains that for a martial arts master this is a common thing. The blonde looks at him displeasedly and asks if he can teach him, because he wants to smell the omega pheromones from a distance, declaring that his debt can be considered payment for training. The man's leg slips off the rocks. He flies down and screams for help. The frightened traveler screams that someone has fallen. They fall down. The participants exclaim not to come closer and not to push. The guide furiously orders them to calm down and press themselves against the wall, because in half an hour they will be in a safe zone. The blonde angrily tells the man to go somewhere far away. The events unfold in the cave half an hour later. Raymond, looking tired, goes forward and exhales that it is finally over. Another participant declares that they are only at the beginning, and already 3 people are dead. The girl cries and calls for her dad, saying that he is no longer there. Her mother, with tears in her eyes, hugs her and consoles her by saying that her dad just went to the other side of the mountain to wait for them. The frightened man asks if anyone has seen the guide, because he was just on the cliff and then disappeared. Raymond turns to the protagonist and asks if he was lying when he said he could smell something, because the old man simply abandoned them and ran away. He explains that he is deep in the cave and is walking towards them with 3 men. The frightened traveler clutches his head and exclaims that perhaps these are the ghosts of people who fell, while the other believes that this is impossible. The protagonist walks in boots. He shines a flashlight and declares that he is as scary as a ghost for the stowaways. The guide stands near Lin and claims that this is a group of illegals and that there are only 12 people here and some of them are rich, so they can squeeze out more money. The blonde screams in rage, insulting him and shouting that he ripped them off so much money for the passage, and also turned them into the patrol, and they told him that he was a good guide. Captain Lin stands near the assistants and declares that the guide is indeed conscientious. It is just their custom to select a group every 2 days that becomes a trophy for the patrol, and they were just unlucky. The guide stands nearby and claims that they now have another chance. If they hand over money, precious metals or jewelry, Lin will allow them to continue on their way. Guanxian looks at him with displeasure and asks what happens to those who do not pay. The guide explains that there will be arrest and execution on the same day. Because the economy is collapsing, work is hard to find, law and order is no different from the western mountains, and the unlucky poor will die of hunger soon after arriving in the Green Hills. The guy with glasses calls them shameless bastards, because they use human life as a bargaining chip. Lin, crossing his arms, demands not to talk to them, warning that in 5 seconds, if no one pays, he will be forced to use force. The frightened traveler holds on to the briefcase and screams that he will not give them the money. The fighter hits him in the face. He looks into the briefcase and takes the jewelry, exclaiming that he found gold. The other tells the girl that she can do without money. The other participants run away in fear. The fighter says that there is only one way out, and he would not advise doing it. The rock collapses loudly. He explains that they are guarding the entrance. The man sighs, saying what a pity. The protagonist holds the monster and says that they overestimate them, because just one hit and they are gone. A glow forms in the creature's hand. It illuminates chi. An exclamation is heard, "Try this, human." Smoke spreads around. The protagonist with a glow in his mouth wonders if this is a gun with sharp armor, because it is chewy and tastes nothing, while thanking for the treat. The monster with sharp fangs looks at him in shock and does not believe that he ate an armor-piercing gun. Chi takes it by the shell and says that there is nothing surprising in this. The monster screams in pain, begging him to stop right now. Chi confidently tears it apart, saying that any healthy man can do it with proper training. The guy goes forward. Captain Lin demands to step back. The fighter holds a little girl and says that if he takes even 1 step, he will kill her. The mother is on her knees and begs him to let her daughter go, saying that if they need a hostage, it is better to take her. Lin kicks her in the head, demanding that she take her hands off. The captain looks away in shock, not understanding what is happening. The protagonist holds the fighter and slams his face into the ground. The soldier screams loudly whether he really did not understand. He holds the child and exclaims that he should not come closer, otherwise he will kill her. The frightened girl calls for her mother. The protagonist closes his eyes and calls for action, because he does not even know her. Lin with a smirk says that he is just pretending that he does not care in order to deceive him, but he will not succeed. The guy with glasses quietly sneaks up behind the villain. Raymond sits behind Guanxian and says that his hands are shaking too much. Guanxian in turn demands that he shut up because he will do it. The guy with glasses calmly looks forward. He remembers his first murder. He looks in shock in front of him. The blonde man skillfully snatched the knife from him and rushed forward. There was a quick blow, blood flew in all directions. Raymond cut off the villain's head with 1 blow. The little girl runs to her mother. She tells her to thank this young man. The blonde man replies that there is no need, because everything is fine. The main character looks at them with a smirk and says that he cannot believe his kindness and that he even saved someone's life. He turns around and replies that this girl's pheromone is a rare durian scent, and as the only sober alpha he must protect the diversity of pheromones in this world and when everything will return to its original state again. But the guy interrupts and wonders why he is explaining all this. The protagonist stands opposite and says that he has passed. He asks again. Chi with a smile declares that he is satisfied with his answer and he is ready to teach him martial arts, a technique that allows him to smell from a distance. Raymond is surprised and asks what impressed him so much in his answer, but since he agreed, he cannot go back on his words, and when they return, the protagonist must teach him. The guide leads the travelers. The man looks at them and declares that this is the last obstacle, and then the territory of Chinchio, and according to their contract, as soon as they reach it, he will forgive him for his actions and save his life. The protagonist with a smile says that there is no need to worry, because he is a man of honor. Collusion with the patrol to ensure the safety of the route is not such a big mistake, and he will not blame him. The guide points his finger and declares that he believes him, clarifying whether they see the barbed wire, calling it a special patrol protection, and if you touch it, an alarm will go off, and the only way inside is through the destroyed hole. The worried traveler asks him not to explain anymore, but to lead the way further, because it is almost dawn. The hero is standing near the fence. The guy with the mark asks the director how much longer to wait, because they have almost crossed the border. Raymond, with a displeased look, says that he just saw how Chi easily killed 2 Class C monsters and his strength exceeds all expectations, while other strong people can lurk around him, and they should be more careful. The ward clenches his teeth in anger, and says that if they wait, the heroes will leave and they will not have another chance. Jing holds the little girl and says that they have a new plan. The guy in shock asks when he managed to catch her, because she is the daughter of an immigrant. Her body shines with yellow light. A woman walks among the travelers and notices the absence of her daughter. She exclaims that the girl is missing. The woman fearfully asks for help in finding her daughter. The guy angrily demands that she shut up, because she will attract the attention of the patrol and they will soon arrive at their destination, and no one wants to waste time on her. Another traveler walks alongside and asks who is to blame for the fact that she does not look after her child, and there is no need to look, because when she gets to the end, she will have a new one. The picture shows a caption that heartless bastards killed her husband and did nothing to protect her daughter, and what's more, they even took her away from her. The frame shows images of people. It is said that now they are going to the Green Hills to live happily. The guide points ahead and assures that the path is now safe and everyone needs to follow the trail he just laid. The woman reaches out to the fence. The guide screams in fear that she has gone crazy, because he cannot be touched, otherwise everyone will die. The woman touches the bars with her fingers. She holds the fence with both hands and screams for them all to die. The man in the hat looked ahead and aggressively asked the man to stop. The woman threw her head back, holding on to the bars, and begged for her daughter to be returned to her. He held a cane in his hands and asked who cared about that child and said that she knew how hard it was for him to develop this route. The guy swung his fist and the patrol leader was killed, and now his route was revealed. He hit the bars with all his might, and they had disrupted his plans, and he had to make them realize the cost of insult, and they should die in agony and despair. Jean was angry and dealt blow after blow. She kept his hand on the strap and, noticing the old man, asked him about him also hitting the fence, to which his comrade asked to forget about him, because the alarm was declared and the patrol would be here any minute and they had to hurry. He knelt down and began to scan the area. The guys were standing next to the guy and asking where he crashed, saying that there was nothing here, to which he replied that this passage was blocked by an invisible barrier, and they would not be able to pass here. The man hit the fence, and said that this would raise the alarm to the maximum level and all areas would be blocked by an energy barrier, which meant that none of them would be saved. An electric discharge occurred. Lightning struck the old man in the arm. He fell to the ground and electricity ran through his body. The man looked away and asked if they had gone crazy and said that especially this old man, he died from the current before the patrol found them, and suggested that they were lucky. Lomha looked back arrogantly next to the little dead girl and said that it wasn't luck but his skill that allowed him to manipulate people's emotions, and this child also came here alone because she was under the effect of his skill, and before he killed her, she thought that she could find her father. He held a cigarette in his hand and said that thanks to her disappearance, he was able to trigger the emotions of the mother and the guide, which led to the highest level of alert, and the patrol leader who would arrive at the scene would be at least a B-class hunter, and noted that it was high time to test Chi's true strength. The accomplice handed the lit lighter to him and asked if it wouldn't be easier to just ask the patrol for help, because the security members belonged to different syndicates and factions, and if they reported Chi's location in advance. Lomha looked ahead and said that moreover, if the patrol was prepared, it would be their merit, and all he needed was a hunter who did not know the truth, and said that they would wait until he and the hero were wounded or dead. A shell fell from the sky and he said that he was very bored. The patrolman approached them and asked if they had disturbed him and thought that it was urgent, asking that there were only 9 fugitives here. The fugitive grinned and said that the patrol was approaching, to which he asked not to worry, because the guard was alone and the guy in the red jacket could easily deal with him. She pointed his finger at himself and asked again, wondering if they were talking about him. The guard took the sword out of its sheath and said that it seemed that they believed in the strength of the guy. There was a blow and the opponent was divided in half. The hero ran forward with his partner and said that he simply killed the one, to which he asked when the patrolman had time. Blood spurted to the side. In one movement, the swordsman cut 2 people down. He looked at the fugitive in the red jacket and said that he would save him for last, to which he said that the guard was very kind. The white-haired man looked ahead, saying that his speed was his strength, and offered to see if he could overtake him and protect the rest. There was a sharp movement, and the guard said that there were 6 left. He ran past the people, cutting them like butter. There was a powerful cut, and he reduced the number. He struck again with a powerful blow and killed 2. He raised his sword above himself, and a dead body of a woman fell nearby, and said that it was boring and the guy in the red jacket did not save anyone. The fugitive looked to the side and said that he was too fast, and he did not even have time to see the moment when he killed. The white-haired man held the sword in his hands and said that it was a waste of time and a complete disappointment, and after he killed him, he would go back to sleep. The hero looked to the side. The guard began to swing, preparing to strike. He held the sword in front of him and thought that this was it. He would cut him into 2 even pieces. The protagonist's elbow hit the opponent's face. The opponent flew to the side from the force of the blow. The body fell to the floor and raised dust. MC held his fist in front of him and said that he hit him and it was very easy, and asked if he was a B-class, saying that he was also more durable than an A-class hunter. The white-haired man put his hand on his face and said that he was pretending and still could keep up with him. She stood with his back to him and said that he was wrong and that he was faster than him. The red-eyed man frowned and said that if that was the case, he would not hold back. The patrolman jumped and said that he would pounce on him at full speed. The hero watched as the opponent moved from side to side. The guard wanted to strike, but the protagonist counterattacked. The foot hit the floor and the opponent said that this time he was sure that he was really slower than him. He stopped himself on the ground and asked how he was able to hit him, to which he replied that the reaction time of an average person is between 0.2 and 0.3 of a second, and for people in good physical condition this figure can reach 1/10 of a second. The swordsman was furious and assumed that he was being humiliated by comparing him to an ordinary person. She looked away and said that Tagsho's speed was much faster than an ordinary person, but when he spoke of reaction speed, he meant the time between the mind giving a command and the body starting to act, and the hunter's reaction speed was certainly faster than an ordinary person, but his speed was no different from that of a Class C hunter, and noted that 0.05 of a second was the limit of him. The opponent began to move to the side, saying that this was enough for him, to which he said that experienced martial artists can determine the opponent's next move by observing the strength of his muscles. The white-haired man gave me the direction vector, and the hero said that he shouldn't have killed him first, because now he had studied all the habits of the opponent's body and he wouldn't be able to defeat him, to which he thought that as a protagonist he could so easily reveal secrets to him. He was going to strike and thought that he could just easily change his habits. MC extended his hand, palm up. She struck with his palm and the enemy fell. He stepped on him and said that as expected, he still decided to change his movements, and noted that this was not something that could be changed so easily. The hero looked down and said that this made the patrolman more vulnerable and now he was in his hands. Longha turns to the walking Guangxian and asks why he was following him, to which the guy replies that he wants to find the missing girl. The hero seriously asks why, if they are almost there, the guy with glasses is going to go back the way they came for the sake of a little girl who has no family, and the friend explains that it will not take long. Longha sniffs the grass when his friend asks if he is sure that the girl is in this direction, and he replies that he smells pheromones, and the girl's pheromones are on trees, flowers, rocks, and they are almost there. The man puts his hand on his friend's chest and Guanxian wonders what happened. Putting his finger to his lips, Longha asks him to be quiet, as something is wrong, and thinks that there are 2 more. The characters stand in front of the girl on the ground. Guanxian is furious, shouting that these people from the Special Intelligence Service deliberately killed the little girl, but the friend asks him to calm down, saying that they are hunters. Longha furrowed his brows and added that the man with the long hair was an alpha and he could handle him, but the other hunter was a beta and he couldn't stand up to him, and if they found them now, they would be finished. Blood spurted out of the character's mouth. The man with glasses worriedly asked Officer Longha what was wrong. With a malicious smile, the man explained that he had just tried to stop Chi with his suggestion skills, but it ended up going wrong. The guy asked tensely how Chi's spirit could be so strong. Longha wiped the blood from his mouth and explained that he couldn't believe it because due to his abilities, he wasn't very good at close combat, but as an A-class hunter, his spirit was at a high level, and although everyone underestimated Chi, his mental strength was even higher than that of an A-class hunter, and as a true martial artist, he had defeated B-class hunters in close combat. The comrade desperately states that the patrol leader is about to be killed by Chi, and asks Officer Longha if he should use his shadow to help. Closing his eyes, the leader explains that his shadow should appear on the battlefield at the most critical moment, but the boy replies that the battle is almost over. Longha, gritting his teeth, tells his partner not to worry, as there is another way to use his suggestion, because with it, He can raise the level of hunters from B class to almost A class, but for this he needs to be extremely focused. Putting a fist to his chest, the character states that the officer can trust him, and he will take care of the safety of the surrounding area, not allowing anyone to interfere with Longha. The protagonist flies back. Chi steps forward and wonders what is happening here, realizing that his opponent has suddenly become stronger. Purple flames come from the antagonist. MC frowns, thinking that the enemy has simply gone crazy. Not only has he lost his sword, but he has also taken such an open position, asking if he is going to attack head-on. A purple trail is left behind the character. She is amazed at the speed, his eyes wide with shock. The antagonist jumps on the guy. The assistant looks at what is happening and realizes that the situation has changed, as the B-class hunter's speed has increased dramatically when he went into a berserk state. Black magic is coming from the character, and she barely had time to defend himself, as he was pushed back. There is a lot of smoke and explosions ahead, and the guy decides that when they run out of steam, he can intervene. The protagonist moves back. The assistant grits his teeth, realizing that the battlefield has moved here too quickly, and he will be noticed. A large hand hangs over the hero. She recalls his words that he felt like something was wrong and someone was using strange techniques or magic to shake his spirit. MC holds the little guy in his hand, adding that the patrolman's condition has changed dramatically and asks if it's him. The assistant panics and asks the hero to wait, because he misunderstood, and he is here to protect him. Clenching his fist, he crushes the guy and says that he doesn't believe him, and the spell on the hunter should also be lifted. The antagonist comes out of the fog and wants to kill. She worriedly realizes that he was wrong. Night falls over the forest. The character falls to the ground. Guangxian screams that he has lost consciousness, and this is the officer's chance. Longha, standing next to him, asks his friend not to worry, explaining that the one with long hair is a Class A hunter, and until he suppresses his powers, Guangxian will only hinder him if he gets involved in a fight, so they need to wait for the officer's command. Bowing his head, the guy in glasses replies that he understands him. The fighter's leg moved. Raymond kicks Longha. The officer's mouth is dripping blood and he states that this is the second time today that he has been interrupted. Raymond sullenly asks why the enemy killed her. Longha narrows his eyes, not understanding who he is talking about. The girl is lying face down on the ground. The officer laughs and asks if his enemy is referring to this little girl and also asks if he wants to fight him because of this, believing that a street thug does not dare to challenge an A-class hunter from the Special Intelligence Service. Raymond stares and says that his enemy emits unusual pheromones, so perhaps there will be no more durian-scented pheromones in this world. Standing in front of Longha, he asks if the enemy will leave him alone. The man charges and states that although his skills are not combat-ready, he can kill the officer with his basic mental strength. Raymond punches Longha in the face. Sitting on the ground, the character holds his mouth and realizes that his technique is gone, asking what the enemy did. The man standing in front of Longha tells him that he doesn't need to know, because a worthless alpha like him is a waste of oxygen in the world and there is no point in preserving his pheromones. Longha looks sullenly, realizing that he is too bad in close combat, and without his psychic abilities, even this brat can kill him, and also the power of suggestion has not been completely destroyed. Raymond holds his forehead and asks what the enemy's last words will be. The officer, sitting on his knee, asks Raymond to wait, explaining that she killed the girl. With a malicious smile, Longha realizes that it works and adds that she is a fugitive, and if he had not tried to leave the border, their special intelligence department would not have followed him to this point, and the girl would not have died. Raymond scratches the back of his head and it seems to him that there is some sense in what his interlocutor said. The man explains seriously that if Raymond kills him, he will automatically become Chi's accomplice, and he is covering for the bastard who killed the girl, and asks if he was close to the protagonist. The character answers worriedly that he has nothing in common with MC, because he has known Chi for less than a day. The officer approaches, extending his hand to Raymond and states that he is a talented young man, so he should be ashamed to be running errands for the Black Snake Gang, and Longha wants him to join the Special Intelligence Department, asking him to help him catch Chi, or even just kill him. Bowing his head, Raymond clarifies whether he wants to kill Chi. Looking sullenly, Longha answers affirmatively, because MC is too dangerous. The guy hits the officer. Longha angrily holds back the blow, asking if his opponent is going to become an enemy of the special services because of this bastard, adding that he will be declared wanted. Raymond punches the antagonist in the stomach and screams at the idiot to shut up, and if he wants to kill Chi, he should kill him first. Blood spurts out of the man's mouth and he is horrified, not understanding what is happening here, because the suggestion should have already worked. Raymond hits the prone officer and declares that MC promised to teach him martial arts and the art of sensing objects from a distance. Punching the enemy in the face, the hero also says that until he finds the omega of his destiny, no one will kill him. Longha is very painful from the blows. Raymond jumps on top of him. Sparks fly. The guy trembles, realizing that the pheromones have gone out of control at such an inopportune moment. With a beaten face, the officer looks to the side. He kicks Raymond back. Crawling on the ground, Longha does not understand what is wrong with the enemy, and it seems to be his power, so he thinks to kill it now, but at the same time he understands that this brat has a very strange ability, and if he kills him, his power may disappear forever. Breathing heavily, the officer decides to use his skill to check the patrolman first. Yellow lightning flashed. The protagonist lifts the enemy by the shirt. The guy looks back. Everything around is dark. Longha looks down in rage, realizing that this is useless and without the berserk buff he will die too quickly, and Chi's power exceeds his expectations, and everything is going through one place, so it is better to focus on staying alive. Walking away from the enemy, the officer holds his shoulder and wonders if Chi looked in his direction at the moment the suggestion skill was interrupted, deciding that it is time to leave, and he cannot stay here. Guanxian has a knife in his hand. Standing with a cold weapon, he shouts at the character to stand still and not move. Looking back, Longha realizes that there was someone hiding there. Guanxian looks sternly and repeats that the man should not move, stay in place and not move. The officer's feet are on the ground. Looking at Guanxian, Longha says that he knows that he is Chi's friend and the chairman of the student council of Shishan University, offering to make a deal with him. Raising a finger, Longha explains that if the guy wants to escape, then there is no problem and he will not interfere, because from now on he will not be an enemy to him and Chi, but in exchange for this, they will allow the officer to take his stupid subordinate and leave peacefully. Bowing his head, Guanxian replies that his subordinate is unconscious and he cannot use his strength, and his body is all bruised, so he has no reason to let him go. With a smirk, Longha states that he is kind enough to give him a chance, and he responds with this. Gritting his teeth, Guanxian asks what is so funny. Laughing evilly, the officer calls his opponent a natural-born coward, since he escaped from prison and is now running away from home, asking what else he can do but run away. Guanxian looks down in anger. With wide eyes and a wide grin, Longha continues that his interlocutor could not save the girl, could not save the students who believed in him, and wants to know if he feels guilty for this. Sadly, the guy replies that he is sorry. Longha laughs and states that an apology is not enough, since they trusted him, and he betrayed them and trampled on their faith, and to top it all off, led them to escape from prison, asking if he knows what will happen to them if they are caught. Standing in front of the man, Guanxian wants to know what he should do, and the character replies that he needs to kill himself, and only after death can he atone for his guilt. Bringing a knife to his throat, the hero replies that he understands this. The man in glasses seriously wants to stop the guy, asking what he is doing and why he decided to end up like this. Guanxian anxiously calls himself a useless coward. The character replies that if he kills Longha, he will stop being a coward, and if he is not a coward, he does not need to kill himself. Guanxian worriedly asks if this is true, adding that he is afraid to kill. The man, standing with a knife, explains that he is Guanxian, so the guy can trust him and asks to give him a knife, assuring that he knows how to kill. The officer sees his opponent with fear and does not understand what is happening to him, and why the suggestion does not work again. A swing flashed. Guanxian stabbed with a knife. His double, in a panic, asks him to stop, because he can't stand the blood. The hero smirks and asks Guanxian to be smart, close his eyes and find the right place to strike, and as long as he can't see, he won't be scared. But he doesn't believe he really wants to do it. Jumping on Longha, the warrior calls Guanxian a pain in the ass, saying he'll do it himself. With a scarred face, the officer says what a terrible day, because he'll meet either a lunatic or a psycho, and they're the worst bad luck in his life. She meditates on a rock. His eyes are closed. He sees his friends return and asks if they found the girl. Walking up to the protagonist, Raymond replies that she's dead and wonders what happened here, because they were gone for a while and there are already a bunch of corpses. The hero goes to his partners explaining that there was a patrol hunter here and he was so fast that he killed everyone before he could react, and someone else was hiding in the shadows, manipulating the hunter's mind. Pointing his finger back, Raymond asks if this is mind control and adds that a hunter from Special Reconnaissance was hiding nearby, so he was the one who kidnapped the girl, and the bespectacled guy had to kill him, so he is a little depressed. Guanxian examines his wrist. MC put his hand on his shoulder. She says with a smile that he did not expect this from his comrade, and it turns out that he is very capable when it matters, apologizes for the fact that the guide is dead and did not have time to save him, and also adds that the road from here to the city may not be easy, but it should not be too dangerous. Guanxian seriously replies that he will not go to the Green Hills, but will return to the Western Mountain to save his classmates, because they risked their lives to help the resistance, but they betrayed their trust by letting them die, so the guy should not betray them, and his classmates, including MC, participated in this because they trusted him. With his hands in his pockets, the hero agrees to help his friend, thinking that he should do him one more favor, save the students, and they will be even. Looking sternly, Guanxian tells Chi that this is not the same as asking him to help him leave the border, because he is going to atone for his sins, and is willing to die, and also adds that the death of the foreign minister, the escape from Blackgate prison, the failure of the special intelligence, and this time they are very serious. That is why even the resistance does not dare now. Chi holds out his hand and says that there is no need to talk about resistance, and give examples of guys without balls, because no one can stop him from helping his friend. Holding his head, Guangxian replies that he is very happy and feels great, and he also thinks that no matter what difficulties MC faces, nothing can defeat him. Looking at his friend, the hero says that the three of them are more than capable of handling the special intelligence. The protagonist looks up and laughs loudly. His comrades also laugh awkwardly. Raymond worriedly asks why there are three of them, hoping that Chi did not count him again, because he is no match for the special intelligence. Looking at his interlocutor, MC asks if he does not understand the situation, adding that Raymond helped smuggle criminals across the border, killed patrolmen and hunters of the special intelligence, so now he is in the same boat with them. Looking back, the man aggressively sends the hero away. As he leaves, Raymond states that if the protagonist does not go to the Green Hills, he will, as he does not need the troubles of the Special Intelligence Department. Kicking a stone, Chi shares how he thought his friend wanted to study kung fu with him and learn to smell from a distance, asking whether he needs it or not. The stone hit the man's shoe. Turning around, Raymond boldly declares that he is ready to do this, explaining that the new agreement is that as soon as MC saves his classmates, he will begin to teach him, and he no longer wants to get involved with them, psychos. The train is at the station. Guangxian shares with Chi that he has a bad feeling. The hero, sprawled on the seat, asks what is bothering his friend, and he replies that he and Raymond met two hunters from the special services and he killed one of them. Looking serious, the guy adds that after that, the second hunter who lost consciousness disappeared, and perhaps he took the opportunity to escape, since they found no trace of him on the way back. Chi calmly asks his friends not to worry about it, since a loser who escaped without his comrade will not be a hindrance to them. Raymond enters the carriage. MC looks at him and asks why he did not go to collect information and return so quickly, to which the man replies that he has news and even an announcement. Standing in the carriage, Raymond explains that from the Black Snake Society, the Special Intelligence Department and the Black Snake Society have agreed to cooperate, and the Black Snake Society will be the main force in catching the escaped students from Shishan University. Guangxian curiously asks if the relationship between the Black Snake Society and the Special Intelligence Department was complicated, not understanding why they suddenly began working together. Raymond, with his hands on his hips, replies that he does not know, and as for the reason, the higher-ups will not tell him, since he is just a lowly employee. Chi emits a blue flame and tells his friend not to think about it, suggesting that they go to the Black Snake headquarters and meet their chairman. But Raymond asks if he wants to insult the Black Snake gang at the same time as the Secret Service, adding that the protagonist is his friend and he needs to talk to him. Guangxian states that he agrees with Chi, and Raymond is surprised by this, since he has always been cautious. Adjusting his glasses, Guangxian explains that the Black Snake Society and the Secret Service have always been enemies, and their cooperation is fragile, and if they find out the reason, they can use the power of the mafia, although it is a dangerous gamble. The heroes walk towards the skyscraper. MC looks up in shock, amazed at how tall this headquarters is. Turning around, Raymond states that he will find a way to introduce his friends to the upper management of the Black Snake Society, and asks the protagonist not to interrupt when he speaks, otherwise they will easily figure out who he is. Holding his hands behind his head, Chi replies that he knows that interrupting, provoking and fighting are not allowed, suggesting that they just go already. There is a scar on the guard's face. The man represents the Baoxing Financial Corporation, Raymond, and adds that the characters do not have the right to enter the headquarters building. Raymond states that he has an important matter here, asking to contact Sandy, as he must be at the headquarters today and do him a favor. The guy stands in front of the guard. The man with the scar explains that Sandy died last month and he has seen many people like him trying to climb the corporate ladder, so he tells the guy to get out of here, do his job and not get cocky, but Raymond doesn't believe that Sandy is not here. In the darkness, the guy hears someone calling him young master. Raymond narrows his eyes, not understanding what it is. Wood puts his hands together and asks Mr. Chi what he is doing here. The protagonist turns around and asks the man who he is, and the character introduces himself as Wood, explaining that he looked after him when MC was little, asking everyone else to quickly bow to Mr. Chi. The man bows in front of the protagonist and greets the young master. Raymond is stunned that his friend is called young master, and Wood is the chief of staff of the Black Snake, remembering how they say that he has kept his temper for years and is not so respectful even to the head of the Black Snakes. Chi, holding his head, tells Wood that he has been having memory problems lately and that he is here to meet the president of the Black Snake Society, to which the man replies that he will call him right away, and that he and his friends should sit upstairs for a while, since their president will be here soon. The guy watches everything from around the corner. He orders his subordinate to go back and tell them to send at least 5 A-class hunters to the operations department, since today he wants the Black Snake Society and Chi to go down together. Looking sullen, the guy tells Director Chien to wait a little longer, since he will soon be able to avenge him.